Good morning. I would like to welcome you to today's special event on the Artemis mission and its connection to K through 12 education. I am Rob LaSalvia, the Partnership Manager in the Office of STEM Engagement at NASA. We are here today to begin a national conversation around Artemis, one of NASA's most exciting planned missions. Our goal is to land the first woman and the next man on the moon by 2024. In order to do this, we will need to achieve a number of significant technical milestones over the next few years. We would like to invite the nation's education community to be part of this journey and work with us to collectively use this incredible mission to excite, motivate, and educate students. We seek your collaboration in leveraging this mission to help define the next decade of students in K through 12 classrooms as the Artemis generation. This mission will open a remarkable new set of possibilities for space exploration, new STEM careers, and a space economy. To begin today's program, I have two important people that I would like to introduce. My co-host today is Katie Wimmer. Katie is a STEM facilitation specialist with the Office of STEM Engagement at NASA. Welcome, Katie.
Thank you, Rob.
Katie, why don't you tell us a bit about how we want to interact with the audience today?
Thanks, Rob. So we have about almost 200 people joining us today on our YouTube stream, and that is a wide variety of our current grantees and awardees, as well as current and prospective collaborators. So welcome, everyone. We do envision this as an interactive session. So to enable your participation, you'll be using what's called an I/O tool with the address seen here on the screen. It's arc.cnf.io, and you'll select Engaging the Artemis Generation Forum. When you access the I/O tool, you'll see a list of questions from our viewers. Please vote up the questions that are interesting to you, and this will determine the questions that the moderators pose to our guests.
It is now our pleasure to introduce Mike Kincaid, the leader of NASA's STEM engagement efforts. As Associate Administrator, Mike is responsible for NASA's programming and collaborations with the education community. Mike also co-chairs the Federal Coordination in STEM Education Committee, which focuses on national interagency support for STEM education, getting all federal agencies to work together to support STEM. Mike has served NASA for more than 30 years. Prior to joining the headquarters leadership team, he served in a variety of leadership roles at the Johnson Space Center. Mike is a strong national advocate for STEM education and is committed to ensuring that students get access to high quality opportunities. Hey, welcome, Mike. Thanks for joining us today.
Hey, thanks, Rob. Thanks, Katie. I'm really excited to be here today. Make sure I'm on. I'm really excited to be here today. And I'm really excited that so many people joined us today. When I think about the work that we have as a country and the work we have as an agency, it's clear that we can only make a difference if we come together. And I'm thinking about that old African proverb: if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I think too often the agency has tried to go fast without necessarily engaging all the other people that it takes to really communicate with students across this country. So I'm really excited about the event that we have today. Let's go ahead. I'm going to cover a couple of key points before we get into the first senior panel. So if you guys will go to the first slide for me. So what you'll see here, this is just gives you a sense of the people you'll hear from today. And I'm really excited about how this is coming together. This first panel, and I'll introduce them in more detail in a few minutes, is some of our most senior leaders here at the agency: Deputy Administrator, Head of Science, Head of HEO, and as well as one of our key center directors. But then the rest of the day is just as strong. The next part is you hear from some of our engineers and scientists who are involved in our laboratories and our engineering labs across the country working on Artemis itself. And then next, we hear from some of our collaborators, some people who've worked with us in the past, who know how to work with NASA. Sometimes we can be a little bit difficult to work with, and these folks have had experience and they can share some of those experiences with you. And then the last panel really looks at how is education changing? When you look at our country, and particularly these last 6 months, when we look at COVID-19 and some civil unrest, there's just a lot going on. And how could NASA best fit into that? I think that's something to be informed by what the community can tell us. And so I'll let you read. You'll meet these people throughout this next couple hours. But I just want to kind of give you a glimmer of the kinds of folks you're going to hear from. to have Dan Dumbacher, Norman, Chris, and Elizabeth and Patty be part of this session is something I'm really excited by. Go to the next slide for me. So again, I just want to say that this is intended, especially this first session with our senior leaders, we want to be this as interactive as possible. So while there's a few pre-populated questions in there, we do hope that you go to arc.cnf.io and add your question and vote up the ones you're most interested in hearing. That's really going to drive the conversation we have today, so we can feel as participative as possible. As I get started, I got to tell you that when we first imagined this event was something we started talking about in December or January with some of our NASA senior leaders. We said it'd be great to bring in some of our industry partners, folks who can work with us and our potential partners with national networks. And we'll bring them to Washington, D.C. We'll have a conversation. And obviously with COVID-19, that didn't work out. And so here we are trying out something new. So we've never done it quite this way. Typically we do partnerships individually, one by one. In this case, we're trying to kind of talk to a lot of different partners together to help them see what is it that we're doing and how we can work together. If you go to the next chart for me, that'd be great. So I want to show you for just a second. This is NASA's STEM vision and mission. It's not just my offices. This is what the agency's STEM vision and mission is. It matters what's for Thomas, for Ken, and for Clayton. Together, we're unified in this work. And we want to immerse students in our work. We want to enhance STEM literacy, and we want to inspire the next generation to explore. And obviously, that looks different for a preschooler than it does for an 8th grader, than it does for someone in graduate school. And so obviously, that's going to change. Today, we're focused on K-12. And looking at those kinds of aspects. But we have aspects throughout that whole demographic. Let's talk about those 3 strategic goals briefly. That first one, create unique opportunities for a diverse set of students to contribute. So to me, the key words that are in there is unique opportunities, things that only NASA can do, and then contributing to NASA's work. When you start really talking about contributing, that tends to be at the graduate or the undergraduate and graduate college levels. But sometimes some of our high school students are actually contributing to our work, and we may talk about some of those as we go on. That middle one, building a diverse future STEM workforce with authentic learning experiences. And so again, there's a couple of key words in there that really matter to me, I think, as we speak about it. First, it's diverse, right? Our future STEM workforce has to look like America. And we are not done the best job as a country in making sure that all different parts of our communities are part of our STEM workforce. And I think many studies have shown that. So I'm not breaking any new territory here, any news here, but it's an opportunity for us to communicate together to make this work. And these authentic learning experiences, right? For NASA to come alongside organizations like the National Science Teaching Association or other entities to figure out, well, how do we bring professional development and professional content that you can use in classrooms? Something that really matters to us. This third one, attracting a diverse groups of STEM through learning opportunities. We might do that through museums and partnerships and after-school programs, and you'll hear about several of those examples. So again, you kind of see big picture. This is how NASA's trying to make a difference. Can you go to the next chart for me? So I want to just highlight 3. There's a lot of things out there, right? But just 3 examples of ways that I think in a K-12 environment that NASA can make a difference. The first one is the next Moon Step Challenge. And if you can find all this information if you go to stem.nasa.gov, you'll find information about all 3 of these. First one is it's an essay contest, and it's asking kids to think, what would they say if they were the first person to step foot on the moon, or if it was their first step on the moon, and getting them to think about that and to build a network of folks who can be part of the ARTEMIS generation as we continue to go through this next couple of years. That middle one, NASA STEM at Home. We've had a website for a long time. That's not new. But as soon as COVID-19 hit, we decided to go out and pick some of our best content, organize it by grade level, and give it to them because it's things that are suitable for kids and families to do at home. We knew that was going to be different, and we had some great, I won't say it's perfect. I think there's a lot of stuff out there, right? But it helps people to find some of the best content that we have. And our friends in HEO and Science and other places helped us populate that information. The last one of our project areas is called Next Gen STEM. How do we take NASA mission content and provide educational materials that can be support what's happening in classrooms or after school programs or museums? And there's a whole element around Moon to Mars. And so again, if you go to stem.nasa.gov, there'll be information about all 3 of these. Next chart, please. Oh, actually, so what I'm going to say here, so in a few minutes, we're going to come back and I'm going to introduce you to the full panel. You'll get a chance to meet them and ask questions and hear from a senior leader. And I told you I'm really excited about who they are. But before we come to them, we want you to watch this 3.5-minute video narrated by a voice that I think you'll recognize.
All engine running.
50 years ago, we pioneered a path to the moon. The trail we blazed cut through the fictions of science and showed us all what was possible.
It's very pretty out here.
Today, our calling to explore is even greater. To go farther, we must be able to sustain missions of greater distance and duration. We must use the resources we find at our destinations. We must overcome radiation, isolation, gravity, and extreme environments like never before. These are the challenges we face to push the bounds of humanity. We're going to the moon to stay by 2024, and this is how.
This all starts with the ability to get larger, heavier payloads off-planet and beyond Earth's gravity.
For this, we designed an entirely new rocket.
The Space Launch System. SLS will be the most powerful rocket ever developed.
And with components in production
and more in testing,
this system is capable of being the catalyst for deep space missions.
we need a capsule
that can support humans from launch
through deep space and return safely back to Earth.
For this, we've built Orion.
This is NASA's next generation human space capsule.
Using data from lunar orbiters that continue to reveal the moon's hazards and resources,
we're currently developing an entirely new approach to landing and operating on the moon.
Using our commercial partners to deliver science instruments and robotics to the surface, we are paving the way for human missions in 2024.
Our charge is to go quickly and to stay, to press our collective efforts forward with a fervor that will see us return to the moon in a manner that is wholly different than 50 years ago.
We want lunar landers that are reusable,
that can land anywhere on the lunar surface.
The simplest way to do so is to give them a platform in orbit around the moon from which to transition.
An orbiting platform to host deep space experiments and be a waypoint for human capsules. We call this lunar outpost Gateway.
The beauty of the Gateway is that it can be moved between orbits.
It will balance between the Earth and Moon's gravity,
in a position that is ideal for launching even deeper space missions.
In 2009, we learned that the moon contains millions of tons of water ice.
This ice can be extracted and purified for water. It can be separated in oxygen for breathing or hydrogen for rocket fuel.
The moon is quite uniquely suited
to prepare us and propel us to Mars and beyond.
This is what we're building.
This is what we're training for.
This we can replicate throughout the solar system.
This is the next chapter of human space exploration.
Humans are the most fragile element of this entire endeavor, and yet we go for humanity. We go to the moon and onto Mars to seek knowledge and understanding and to share it with all. We go knowing our efforts will create opportunities that cannot be foreseen. We go because we are destined to explore and see it with our own eyes. We turn towards the moon now, not as a conclusion, but as preparation, as a checkpoint toward all that lies beyond. Our greatest adventures remain ahead of us. We are going.
We're going.
We are going.
We are going. We're going.
I don't know about you, but I love that video. I've probably seen that video 50 times, and it still makes me excited every time I see it because it just reminds me of the exciting mission that NASA has, and frankly, we couldn't do it without you, without the people who are on camera today, or I'm sorry, watching us on camera today, being part of today's session and kind of helping us think through how do we engage kids, particularly K-12 students in our mission. So our first panel of today is actually some of our most senior leaders. I'm really excited, and all of them were quick to say yes to joining us today. But before I start asking them questions, let's first start by introducing them to you so you get a chance to know who they are. So first up, I'd like to introduce our Deputy Administrator, Jim Morhard. So Jim has a really interesting background. He started off as an analyst in the Secretary of the Navy, then spent 15 years working with the Senate Appropriations Committee, so he knows where all the money is, which is important for us. Spent some time as the Deputy Sergeant of Arms in the Senate, Also spent some time in private industry until he joined us as the NASA Deputy Administrator nearly 2 years ago. He, along with Jim Bridenstine, managed an agency of 17,000 plus employees and almost $23 billion. And I have to say that it's $2 billion more now than it was when he started. So clearly he's figured out how we get money from the Senate appropriators. So we appreciate that. I'm glad to have you, Jim.
I'm excited to be here. It's my honor.
That's great. Next up is Thomas Zerbukin, or Dr. Z to most of us. And so Thomas joins us as the Associate Administrator for the Science Mission Directorate. I love this online bio, and I want to read this portion too, because it really describes what SMD is about. It says, SMD is helping us answer some of humanity's biggest questions. Where do we come from? Are we alone? How does the universe work? And so I think Dr. Z brings a level of energy and enthusiasm that I think is contagious, and you'll hear that today in the session. He also has an interesting background. Degrees in physics from Switzerland, was a professor at the University of Michigan for a number of years, and then nearly 4 years ago joined us as the AA Associate Administrator for SMD, where he leads hundreds of scientists and manages over $7 billion a year in helping us manage our science activities, and great passion for STEM. Next up, I'd like to introduce to you Ken Bowersox. Ken is the Deputy AA, or the Deputy Associate Administrator, and HEO, Human Exploration and Operations Mission Directorate. Ken also has an interesting background. These guys are really, all four of them you're going to find really interesting. So Ken went to the Naval Academy, became an astronaut in class of 1987, had 5 missions on shuttles, including one long duration stay on board the International Space Station, and head of the flight crew office there in Houston. He left the agency for a while, spent some time in this company you might have heard of called SpaceX, and then came to work. Actually came to be on the NASA Advisory Committee, which basically gives advice, outsiders give advice to NASA. And I guess that Jim Bridenstine and Jim Morehard thought his advice was so good, they actually asked him to come back and become the Deputy Associate Administrator for HEO. So we're glad to have him. And last but definitely not least, Clayton Turner. Clayton is the Center Director at Langley Research Center. So Langley Research Center, often referred to as the Mother Center. They celebrated their 100th anniversary in 2017. So if you think 1917 was pretty early in the days of aeronautics, so they have a long history, including some more recent work with test landing of the Orion spacecraft, which we'll talk about. Clayton also has an interesting background. Did some interesting things, and then he ended up in community college, and then ended up graduating as an electrical engineer from Rochester Institute of Technology. He started at Langley 30 years ago this year, in fact. He served in a lot of engineering roles, including as the chief engineer for Langley, the leader of the engineering directorate, the deputy center director, and now the center director. But I got to tell you, one of the things that I most appreciate about Clayton is his passion for inspiring the next generation. Whenever we ask him, hey, can you help us with this? It's a yes before we even finish the sentence. And later in today's session, I'm going to ask him a question about how preschoolers and center directors mix, because there's an interesting story, and I'm interested to hear. I've only heard bits and pieces of it, and I want to hear it for the first time with everybody here today. So as you can see, this panel is very diverse. You have scientists, people on the Hill, people who've been an astronaut, people who've been engineers, universities, NASA careers, all of the above. And I'm really excited just to kind of think through, how do we take this Artemis and connect our nation's classrooms? So let me start by asking the panel this first question, and I think I'll direct it to you, Jim Morehard, for this first. So when you think about Artemis, what are some of the goals and what excites you about that?
You know, Mike, that's just a great question, because in reality, all eyes are on Mars right now. And Thomas, I'm sure, will mention it, but right now, his organization is getting ready to send a rover to Mars. And we're trying to prepare ourselves to get to Mars with humans. And one, we want to find whether there's evidence of life there. But we're also trying to become interplanetary travelers. And to do that, we really have to work a lot of things out. And there's a saying here I've heard today, first time, bots before boots. And, you know, that's what we're working on. We're going to have robots looking at what Mars looks like. And Thomas is leading that charge right now. And then Ken's organization is really starting with bringing human exploration back to the moon in preparation to go to Mars so that we can learn what we need. Are we ready to go right now? Not yet, but we will be, and that's what we're working on.
Who'd like to go next? Thomas?
Well, this is really an easy question for me because I think about Artemis every day because I think it's such a demonstration of science and exploration coming together and mutually enhancing each other to really make history. And who doesn't want to be part of an activity that truly is transformative and is making history, something that for sure we're going to talk about decades and centuries later. And that guy with a lot of mistakes and weaknesses that I am, has, even when he speaks, it's obvious that he's not even great at that, right? So it's kind of that guy together with a team of many coming together, in fact, all coming together, can make history in a way that is truly transformative. That's what's exciting to me. It's that human dimension, doing something impossible together.
Thanks, Thomas. Hey, Clayton, what do you think about this question?
So one of the most exciting things for me are the inspiration and opportunity. So by doing Artemis and all the things you've heard described thus far, it excites the nation. It excites us to wonder what's possible, and it inspires us to think beyond what's possible. And also the opportunity. So as we return to the moon in 2024 and we learn to live and work there and we go on to Mars, that's opening up opportunities for the nation, not just within government, but across our society. And so those opportunities to do things I never thought I could do before, and those new things that we haven't even thought of yet. So you have combined in Artemis inspiration and opportunity, and that's what's going to drive the Artemis generation.
Ken?
Well, I think what excites me most about Artemis is that it's one more step as we move humans away from Earth and out into our solar system. We've been in low Earth orbit for a long time, working at the International Space Station, building the base to go from, and now we're going to move out to the moon and eventually to Mars. Something that Thomas kind of hinted at is that all exploration is human, whether it is with robots or whether it's by sending people to do the exploration. And so it's something that we can do as a team together to show how much we can accomplish when we bring in a diverse group of individuals to accomplish a common goal. And so that's what I think is most exciting.
Spoken like a true astronaut.
That's exactly right. So I'm looking at these questions that people have been populating. Again, for those of you watching at home, I hope you'll go to arc.cnf.io and add your question or vote up the questions that you see. This first question that got up to 24 votes on it, so let me throw it out there to see if one or two of you want to bite on this. How would you define success when you think about this work that we're trying to do this next year, where we're trying to engage students, particularly K-12 students in Artemis? Look at 10 years from now. What would success look like? When you look back and say it's 2030, you say, boy, what we started in 2020, that was sure was successful because... How would you guys answer that question?
Mike,
Yeah, go ahead, Jim. I'll go Jim and then Clayton. How about that?
Okay. I look at it and we're really trying to understand the environments we're going to place astronauts in, whether that's the environment on the moon and the Martian environment. And there's a lot of technical development that needs to happen before we're able to live and work on it at either place. And we're really just trying to lower that risk. I mean, you think about it, it's much like, this is about logistics. This is about getting things there in advance that we can use and making sure that we've got what we need for our astronauts. And that includes power, propulsion. It's, can we use the resources on the moon and Mars to manufacture things? Could we take water ice, which we believe is at the south pole of the moon, and harvest it for oxygen and for hydrogen for propellant and for water to drink? It's those types of things, and we're going to be doing that through many different ways, some robotic and some through human exploration. Clayton?
So, and Jim,
or was it Thomas? I'm sorry.
Clayton.
Yeah, my response the same lines, that as we do the things you described, they are commonplace. So right now we're learning how to do those things, and we will meet those goals. But in 2030, we want them to feel more commonplace, because we've gotten that. We're ready to move on to the next thing. Just like we saw in the history of aeronautics, what was rare and impossible has become commonplace. That's what success will look like. We've achieved those things, and we're on to the next set of things on to Mars.
That's good. So I really appreciate how you guys have talked about what NASA is going to see different and what success looks like. When you think about the kids that we're trying to reach, the students, K-12 students, and you think about them 10 years from now, what are some things that you hope they've learned? What are some skills? When you think about things that NASA needs from our future engineers, what are those things that you're hoping that will come from the kids in our classrooms today?
Do you mind if I take that one first? I'm sure
That'd be great,
everybody has something to say here, but I'm a 20-year educator, and I know the moment when it happens. What I mean with it is that moment where you know that some kid, a young adult, realizes that they can do more than ever thought before. And for me, what big projects, like big, ambitious, very, very, very tough projects like Artemis, what they do is they create moments like that. Not only of the people who work on it, but of the people who observe it, because they realize they could do things that they never would have guessed. And that energy may be directed towards NASA in a way that we all have NASA badges. That energy may be directed towards industry. You talked about where some of the colleagues on the camera right now worked before, right? Kind of developing new businesses that totally transform the way we even go to space. So that energy may be directed towards finding a cure for an illness that affects our families, right? The energy of recognizing that it is possible. We can think bigger than we have done before, and we can come together and do things that are absolutely not even in the realm of possible. They're in the big, ginormous box that stands in a corner, which is things we don't know how to do. We can take things out of that box and start doing them. For me, it's that inspiration. That's another way of saying inspiration. It's that inspiration that I really hope is not only coming from people who are already considering themselves kind of space cadets. I'm really glad for each and every one of them, people who think about space just like the way I've always had. But I'm actually more excited, or even at the same level of excitement, for people who are currently not considering themselves being part of that, because they also can get that spark that could really propel them in ways that they would never have guessed.
If I could add on to that. Go ahead, Ken.
All right, go ahead there, Jim, and I'll add on it.
Okay, sure. And I certainly mimic what Thomas is saying, but I also have to say one of our challenges is, it's K through 5. Kids are excited, and it works, but as we all experienced with the social pressures of, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, and then high school, those grades, we lose a lot of kids. And, we're still trying to figure out how do we best serve those children where we can keep them interested and keep them focused. And, it's STEM, it's what covers there, but there are so many more other parts. I have a accounting degree. I mean, we're going to need accountants. There are so many other people that we're going to need in this effort. But again, you all know that there is a lot of other countries that are really focused on the STEM fields more than we are. And we certainly are trying to focus that on right now. Do we have enough people right now to do what we need to do? I don't think we do. And we really need all your help to try to figure this out.
Yeah, I remember back when I was in grade school and junior high watching the early astronauts on their missions, and that excited me. It made me want to be part of the program. So it carried me through really boring math lessons and some of the other classes that I might not have liked very much, thinking that someday, hey, maybe I'll get to fly in a space shuttle or go to the moon. Now, it doesn't look like I'm going to get to go to the moon, but it still made me work hard in class. And it wasn't just me. I mean, I could tell you dozens of other students that were just as excited about what they saw going on in Apollo, and Gemini and Mercury and Space Shuttle and Apollo Soyuz. And a lot of those students went out and did different things in society. Some of them became doctors, some of them became lawyers, some of them became flight controllers for NASA, and a very few of us got lucky enough to become astronauts. But the excitement that we gained from watching that whole team of NASA folks work was what carried us through some of the difficulties in school and helped us get out and be even more productive in society. And I hope that's what we see in 10 years is a lot of kids who are excited to gather all the different skills that we need, not just inside NASA, but in the world in general.
Hey, Clayton, this might be a good time. I think this might be a good time to ask you, tell us how preschoolers and a center director, how do those things coexist? How does that story fit together for Clayton?
So I'll share my first day as center director of Langley was October 1st, and I spent that first day with a class of 4-year-olds and 3-year-olds. For the 4-year-olds, we got together and we made a solar system. And if you're ever having a rough day, you want to get together with some 4-year-olds and make a solar system, and an active solar system where they're revolving and spinning, and then have a conversation about it. Because while we're laughing and joking and having fun, they are getting it. They can tell you which one's closer, which one's bigger, which one's smaller, so they get it. And then after that, I had the opportunity to talk to some 3-year-olds. I talked to them about gravity, aerothermodynamics, and coding. And as people wonder, has he lost his mind? No, they're actually books that gear to that. I did not quote equations to them. I talked to them about concepts. I had a ball in my hand. I dropped the ball, and I asked the 3-year-olds, why did the ball fall? And a 3-year-old young lady told me because it's not a balloon. And then she told me why a balloon goes up. That's a 3-year-old. She got it. She understood the concepts. Didn't quote equations. So to me, that's inspiring because she is ready to go. Others are ready to go. We just have to feed them so they can make those choices for themselves. They can find those passions. So again, they're never too young. And when we excite that 3-year-old and that 4-year-old, they're ready for elementary school, they're ready for middle school, and they're ready for high school. So that was really exciting for me. And I'll share that story as long as somebody wants to hear it, because that was great fun.
Well, Clayton, I've got a follow-up question for you. You knew you were becoming center director that day, so it was not a surprise to you. And I'm just curious, what made you decide I'm going to spend my first day with 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds?
So I believe passionately that the group that literally has our future in their hands are our teachers and educators. Of all the groups, we do amazing things at NASA, and we're really stretching out for the future. But that is a group that's literally molding the young minds. So we at NASA can go out and I can visit the classroom for a day, but the teachers are there every day. So to excite that group and put that energy and share that message that those 3- and 4-year-olds are ready, that second grader is ready. You know, it's not just rote, I memorized this and I told it back to you, but let's excite them. Let's use NASA as a way to inspire and excite. So that's why I wanted my first day to be getting that message and continuing to share that message, along with the amazing things we get to do within the agency.
That's great. I really appreciate you sharing that story. So the top question currently in the, if people want to go to arc.cnf.io and vote up their question, the top question has to do with how is NASA assisting students who do not have access to technology? But before I ask you that question, I want to do 2 things. One, I want to extend it a little bit. So how does NASA reach students who may not normally have access to us just in general, not just in technology, but how do we reach those underserved populations? And I know, Clayton, you've had some particular work. I also just want to say that from NASA's perspective, from Office of STEM engagement, we really have spent some time talking about, yes, we did this whole initiative to pull together resources and content from SMD and HEO and others, that NASA STEM at Home. It helps students who have access to technology be able to get our content. But I tell you that one of the reasons why we're having today's session is because we know that in order to reach the students who may not have technology, it's going to take other people partnering with us. So NASA on its own can't solve it. But we can work with after-school programs, who some of them are on with us today. We can work with others who are in their local communities or have resources available. So I'm glad that people are asking this question. But I would also say that that's why we're doing this today, and that's why we're hoping that the people who are listening to us at home can help us figure out how do we get that last mile, so to speak, into students' homes. But let me open up that question in general. Do you guys have any thoughts about how NASA can reach underserved populations and those who may not have access to technology?
So if I could take a shot at that. So there are a number of ways I think we can do that. It's all the ways we've described up to this point. It's also just taking the time to go out into those classrooms and those communities. I will say that we have a group of our employees, and this is us engaging in the community, that went out on their own and started working with a local Boys and Girls Club. And they would spend time, they would tutor, they would share a message, and this doesn't require technology or widgets or computer or internet access. And they worked for a few months, and they really weren't getting a response from the students. The students weren't engaging. But they persevered, they kept working. And what they found out, and this is what they came back and told me, is something that I know from things I've done, what the students were looking to see if they were going to be there. So are you going to pop up for a day and disappear? Or are you going to be here? And what they found out once they demonstrated to the students that they are going to be there, everything opened up. They are now in 2 different Boys and Girls Clubs in the neighborhood. So that's an example, Mike, of us partnering with community organizations. And we can do that in local areas where our centers are, where our facilities are, but we can also go to broader communities to demonstrate where we're going to be there. And we can inspire others. We had a pathway student, which is an intern, who finished up her program, and I charged her with, you are now an ambassador for us. Go out there and find others to come and join us. Show us how we can help and connect. So I agree with you. What we're doing here is to find more ways to connect, even more than what we've done to date.
You know, let me ask, the next question is on here. I'm kind of picking and looking down the list of questions, but I think what fits along this is actually the 3rd and 4th questions. And the 3rd question is, why don't we see women in this leadership panel? And I just have to say that Ken's new boss, who started 2 days ago, is a woman, and Thomas's deputy is a woman. So there are certainly people in key leadership roles. But I also think our new mission, our Artemis mission, has a desire to engage women in that process. But I want to characterize, I want to actually be more global than just women, because the 4th question is, why is diversity and inclusion so important to NASA's future workforce? Because I don't think it's just about women or it's just about certain aspects, right? It's all of these pieces. How do we make sure that we're diverse and inclusive? Thomas, do you want to start with that? Because I know you've had some thoughts on this topic, and you've been sharing that with your workforce.
So whenever we answer those questions, we look at them through the lens that we have. You need to know my lens. Clayton has a different lens than I do. Jim can have different lenses that I do. I look at it through the lens of a 1st-generation student. It's the first one in his family to go to college, right? I know that from that, there are certain hurdles that I had to overcome. And by the way, in front of each one of those hurdles are careers that ended because the hurdle took them out. So the mere fact that I overcame does not mean that we should not eliminate the hurdles. We want to actively kind of reach back and say, what were the hurdles that were there, and eliminate them. There's certain hurdles that Clayton understands, that I learned from Clayton and many of my friends across NASA and elsewhere. But why is it important? Well, it's important for 2 reasons, 2 lenses that I think are important. The first one is diversity, and especially inclusion in a team, creates excellence in that team. For me, excellence and group things are opposing value. It's values that, yes, you're really fast at finding solutions. You're very fast at getting to consensus because you all think the same way, but it's a very shallow and not thoughtful approach to us. Frankly, in every problem that we're solving, in the science mission director, and I know Ken can speak for human exploration, Clayton can speak about aeronautics and all the elements of big kind of problem solving, requires diverse teams that come together and are better than they are alone. So that is the first why. So for me, diversity and inclusion is not some kind of extra thing did we do once we're done with doing the mission? It's directly linked to our ability of doing the mission. There's a second lens that's also important, and I think it's the lens of social justice. We should remember these hurdles. We want to look at the world and basically see and recognize and pattern match where there are hurdles that are just not fair. And we want to go eliminate those for that reason alone. But so it's really both of those. It's two sides of one medal that, for me, motivate me. That's why we, in Science Mission Director, we've been deliberate about adjusting our hiring practices, especially how we recruit into the pool. Every hire is absolutely fair. We want the person that will best do in that job in the team that we have. But we adjust these practices. We actively look at this because at the end, if we miss a whole fraction of the community that is not part of our team, we are weaker. We are less likely to be successful in our missions. That's why I care about it.
Thanks, Thomas. Other panelists want to add into this question?
I would just like to say that, there's a lot of value in diversity. Thomas hit those values. To me, it's real simple. It's diversity of background, diversity of thought, different people bringing in new ideas to solve complex problems. But the flip side of that is that diverse people with different backgrounds sometimes require a little more time to come to a solution. Sometimes it's a little harder for those types of teams to work together. And so as a manager or a leader, you need to make sure that you work with your teams to get past those problems. That's what the inclusion part is about. You have to take positive steps to include the people with different ideas, or you miss out on those ideas. They can be alienated, they can be held aside. There are all these things that can happen, and it prevents you from building the broad team in society and inside your organization that's required to accomplish these really difficult tasks that we have ahead of us.
If I could, the thing that I see is you think about our astronauts back in the days of Apollo, and they were white fighter pilots. And today we've got a diverse team of astronauts. And soon hopefully before the end of this year, we'll be announcing the ARTEMIS team. And I think you'll see that diversity that we're trying to lead by example. And yeah, do we still have challenges at NASA? Everybody does. And we're working on those. I think you'll see in the future, we'll be coming out with more efforts to try to address the issues at hand in our country within NASA. And are we ever going to solve it? I don't know, but we're going to try. We are willing to try to do the hard things here. But it starts with, individual relationships, but it goes all the way to the moon and to Mars. We've got to have that collaboration that Ken and Thomas are talking about, it more so than we did with Apollo. And you read the history books, there wasn't as much collaboration as we have now with our astronauts. And that's a big factor when we're selecting who these astronauts are going to be. And you can see it in our most recent graduates. But we're going to continue to try to work on this in different ways.
Yeah, and I'll just chime in. I think what you've heard from my fellow panel members here is that when you're doing really hard things, you have to have different perspectives. If I had a room and I told you to go and make me a lamp and you stamped out 10 Claytons, it would look a certain way because of my training. But if I had a room and I needed to be able to see or do something in it, I might get a perspective that Clayton wouldn't have come up with. So now you move out to the Artemis activity and you think about how complex that is. And we want all those different ideas and thoughts to come in. And then you add to that, as Jim just described, our astronaut corps. So how many people are going to be inspired? How many of our youth are going to be inspired because they can see somebody that looks like them? And I can do that too. So we want all of America to be inspired. I see somebody doing that thing. So it's not impossible for me. It is possible. So this isn't an overnight policy fix. This is a long-term thing. But as Jim said, as we put in our work to get it and we continue to inspire, we continue to do amazing things, and show the benefit of that diversity, the benefit of that inclusion, then we will get to where we want to get to.
Yeah, as I listen to you guys, I'm struck again by the fact that NASA on its own can't solve these problems, right? We're a small, tiny portion of the federal government. And yet we have this outsized opportunity to really serve as role models. When I think about each of you are role models in your own communities, but when I think about like Hidden Figures and the way that movie kind of showed the role NASA can play, and I know later during one of the breaks we're going to show you a new 2.5-minute video on Mars Perseverance that's narrated by one of the actors from Hidden Figures. So again, I think, and Jim talked about this new Artemis class of astronauts. And when our administrator is on talking about the first woman on the moon, I think those are truly inspirational things. Or when I think back to the all-female EVA that we had this last fall, there's moments in time that NASA can communicate in ways that a lot of words on a paper never can. And so I really appreciate each of the panelists and your role. And again, I want to come back to my next question. It's a little further down, but I think it fits along right here. Is why are partners so important to NASA and Artemis? And again, I just want to remind us, the people we're talking to are hopefully our current and future partners to help us reach to reach students in places where our field centers may not be. What thoughts do you guys have about why are partners so important in this next portion of our mission?
If I could just start off, certainly we've talked about diversity and there's partnerships there, but we also are trying to bring in more international partners. NASA is really here to bring the world together, and we're trying to do that with the Artemis program. And we're doing it, we call the Artemis Accords, and it's really trying to promote positive values that many educators are trying to promote in schools. And it's whether it's honesty or integrity, it's sharing, it's safety, it's trying to help others. These types of values we're trying to promote across the world, and we want international partners that will do that with us. We also know, all know how difficult our financial situation is in the United States. And we know that in the past, we used to research, develop, build, launch, and operate spacecraft. And we're now working with commercial industry to do a lot of that. We want to be a customer to commercial industry. We just launched a rocket that owned the capsule, and we're hoping that we got to get our 2 astronauts home safely, which we'll do in August. But with that, the intent is that we're going to be a customer, hopefully one of many customers to SpaceX, and Boeing is also working on a similar program. But we're trying to set this up so that we commercialize space, and there's a reason why there are going concerns in space, and we'll still be involved. We'll still be guiding these companies to make sure that we're going in the right direction. But again, it's a way that we can go and as I said before, to have interplanetary travel that's affordable, and we can only do that with commercial partners.
Any other thoughts about partners from our panel?
So if I could chime in, Mike, I would say with the group here, what Jim described is exactly what we want to be doing, but we also want you to help us with our future workforce. So the vast majority of the people that are going to enable the largest parts of Artemis are in the schools right now. They're going to be joining us later, and by joining us, I mean joining NASA, joining our commercial partners, some in international partnerships. So you're inspiring that workforce for the future. So we literally need your help to do that. So that partnership to inspire and excite is what we need you to help us do, to share that message of what you can do. And even those that don't join us on this journey, they will be excited, hopefully because of what you're sharing with them and what we share with them, to do things that will make our own communities better places. And we'll all be in a better place. And then our minds will be free to go and do other amazing things. So it is a partnership that can enable what we're doing here at NASA, but enable what we're doing across the nation and across the planet.
Well said, Clayton.
It really is. So the number one question now on IO, I think fits really well with generating this future workforce that Clayton just talked about. And that's what careers or skills do we need today and in the future in the Artemis workforce? So let me throw this question to Thomas and Ken. So when you think about our future workforce that we're grooming today, what skills come to mind that our partners and collaborators could be talking about with our nation's students?
Go for it, Ken.
Well, the first things that come to mind are science, mathematics, the technical types of skills that go into building the vehicles and the tools that we use for exploration. But, it's really broader than that. You can't explore if you can't explain what you're doing to people. You need English majors. You need people that know how to speak. You need people that can handle videos. You can't explore if you can't define what it's going to cost. You need accountants, you need lawyers, you need people to work contracts. I mean, we need just about every type of specialty you can imagine. Now, we may need more of one type than another, but we need everything.
Yeah, I really want to add to that. So needs to say there is a well-documented shortage of STEM talent, and the shortage is becoming bigger as we go forward. So if you look at our students that are currently sitting in middle school and high school, there's too few at this current likelihood that they have, as predicted from the last 10 years, that will go into these fields. There's more opportunity there. Those are well-paying jobs. Those are very worthwhile jobs. They're fun. They're great. They involve science is not a single man or single woman activity. It's a team sport, and so that's what modern science is today. It's very rare that kind of science is really on their own. But I agree with Ken. If we stop there, that would not make a successful activity. We need the others. I think that the element that I want to add to Ken's point that he did really well is every one of those, whether those are STEM, whether those are artists, whether those are English majors, whether those are accountants, people who help us better in the procurement and kind of activities that we spend a lot of time on. What's important to them is they have the ability to integrate into a team. They have the ability of locking arms with people that are not like them, communicating to them in a clear fashion, in a fashion that allows these teams to excel in a way that we talked about earlier. So for me, sometimes we spend a lot of time on the major. I'm actually much more interested in the other piece, or equally interested in the other piece. Are these people willing to listen? Are these people willing to learn? Are they willing to recognize that difference is good for them too? Are these people willing to basically empower a team? Some of us need to be leaders. We earn to be a leader by being able to be an enabler and empowerer of a leader first, right? Are they willing to do that? So for me, it's that other part. The model many people use is this T-shape. Like, yes, it's depth and excellence in a given discipline, whether that's STEM or otherwise, English or whatever, but it's the ability of connecting and turning into teams and kind of making these things better than the sum of the parts. So for me, that is just as important, my opinion, in that discussion of education and backgrounds.
Let me interrupt here. Believe it or not, this 40 minutes has just flown by, so we're getting ready to wrap up. I'm going to give each panelist 60 seconds. And if you will, just imagine you're sitting in someone's living room or office, home office, and they're a potential partner. Right? There's someone who's outside of the NASA content. They're not paid directly by us. They're someone who's interested. What's your 60 seconds before you want them to leave with Artemis and with this time together? And I'll tell you what, I'm going to pick on Jim Morhart first, and then Ken next, and then I'll do Thomas and end with Clayton. How about that? So Jim, if you had 60 seconds, what would you want to tell a potential partner?
I think there's, I can't ignore where we are in history right now. There's a lot of suffering going on in this country and in the world. And NASA was set up to expand knowledge and to improve the human condition of all humanity, not just the United States. And I think we continue to try to do that. If you think back before we landed on the moon the first time in 1968, we were facing, Martin Luther King was killed, Bobby Kennedy was killed, the My Lai massacre occurred. There were other massacres in Vietnam. The Vietnam War was going on. And we had similar challenges, very difficult challenges, as we do today. And we landed on the moon, and I think we helped bring the world together. We brought hope, and that's what we're trying to do here at NASA, is to bring us together in the United States, bring us together in the world, and to give hope to people that don't have it right now. And that's, I think, more than anything else, that's what all of us on this panel, we work very closely together. And it goes back to what Thomas talked about. Yeah, we need smart people, but we also, if you can get across to students, we need people who get along. We get along on this panel. We're friends. Now, Clayton's new to being a center director, so I don't know Clayton as well as I know the other guys, but I look forward to it. And we kid him because he's always dressed so well. And but it's those type of things. It's relationships. It gets back to the diversity issue, the issues at hand. This is about compassion for others, loving each other, taking care of each other. And we're trying to promote that everywhere we can at NASA. So I'll stop there.
Thanks, Jim. Hey, Ken, 60 seconds.
First, I just want to say thanks. Thanks for sharing your time today to be with us. Thanks for what you do with students. Thanks for the support you give to us at NASA. And the biggest thing I'd like you to take away is please share what you heard today with other people so that more and more people know about what we're doing at NASA, more and more people know about Artemis, and more people know about how we're trying to take humans and move us away from Earth out into the solar system and how they can be part of it.
That's awesome. Thomas, easy.
I want to add, so I'm not going to repeat much of what is said. I think it's a unique moment in history. I think it's a moment that requires both hope and perseverance. Those are the things that are in our minds. I think exploration is about both of those. There's no exploration without hope. Hope is driving us. We hope we can do better. We hope we can be better. And perseverance is the flip side of that, which is hard things. It's just hard to do big things. We need you. We need you to be part of this because, frankly, there is no other way of achieving success than through that partnership. And it is fun, and it opens up doors that, frankly, you didn't even know were doors before you looked at them. So I really see that as an important part of that.
That's nice. Clayton.
So thank you. So I wanted to thank you for joining us here today, and also hopefully what you'll take from this and what I would share in my 60 seconds in the living room is that we want to partner with you. We need what you bring to the table, and we're going to do these amazing things together. Sometimes it's going to be a little harder. We would ask that you persevere because know in our heart, we want to make those partnerships work. We want to make that difference that you heard all of our fellow panel members describe. So join us on this journey. The challenges that we face today, those are possible to work through as we look forward to the bright future in front of us. And that's something all of us are going to do together. So persevere with us, partner with us, and we will do amazing things together.
Well, I'll just close this out by saying when I started this panel, I said I'm really excited about who's on this panel, and you can see now why that's the case. What we're going to do to wrap up this section, we're going to end with a short video, 90-second video called I Dreamed of This. And then later in today's session, in a breakout session, we'll show you the perseverance about Mars perseverance on our new rover. But with that, thank you to my fellow panelists. Thank you for your time today, and we're all excited to see where Artemis.
Yes.
Thanks.
And God willing, as we shall return.
You probably dreamed of this.
Liftoff on Apollo 11.
You probably replayed this moment 1,000 times. You probably imagined the awe-inspiring, indescribable rush of the ride. You probably celebrated the miraculous, cheered the momentous, and mourned the shocking. You probably still dream of what could be. We did. We do. And while many thought we were through, no. We've been learning, we've been building, we've been training. And now, it's time. Because the next frontier is not just for the next generation. It's for this generation. It's for me, and it's for you. For everything we still dream about. We go as Artemis.
Welcome back, everyone. We appreciate that nearly 650 people are joining us today, and we hope that you enjoyed our first fireside chat as well as the videos. This next fireside chat has been pre-recorded. However, the participants are with us today to answer your questions. Please load your questions into the I/O tool located at arc.cnf.io, and remember to select Engaging the Artemis Generation Forum. We encourage you to add questions and vote up existing questions.
That last discussion really showcased the passion and commitment of agency leaders, senior leadership to exploration. It showed the big picture approach and direction of the agency. This next discussion features scientists and engineers who every day are working on making Artemis happen. They will share their perspective on the work that they do and how they are contributing to this mission. I would like to introduce Dr. Joletta Patrick, the Office of STEM Engagement Director at NASA Ames and Armstrong. Dr. Patrick is a former engineer and NASA flight controller. Prior to her position in California, Joletta led both the NASA Space Grant and MIRAP programs. Dr. Patrick very much enjoyed leading this next conversation.
Okay, let's see what our Artemis stars have to say.
Welcome. My name is Joletta Patrick, and I am the California STEM Engagement Director at Ames Research Center and Armstrong Flight Research Center, both located in California. I want to thank you all for participating in today's discussion. Today's panel represents some strong examples in scientific and the technical workforce who dedicate every day to working to making the Artemis program a reality. Each of our panelists here today, because they have the passion and commitment in ensuring that NASA achieves its ambitious mission goals. Each of them are committed to helping inspire and engage the next generation of STEM workforce. We have assembled an exciting group of speakers, so let's get started. Let's start out with the hardest question of the day. So in 90 seconds or less, could you introduce yourselves and tell us how you are contributing to the Artemis mission? Let's start out with Yvette Aponte.
Hi there, I'm Yvette Aponte. Hi, I'm from Orlando, Florida. I'm a civil structural engineer in the Kennedy Space Center, and I have the privilege of working as a project engineer and integration engineer for the engineering organization, directly working with the Artemis mission. So it's very, very exciting. What I get to do is that I get to take a project from beginning to end, so from design and then construction and then installation. I'd help the team move through all those phases, and specifically, I'm involved with the mobile launcher. So the mobile launcher is very, very important piece of equipment that is going to help launch the Artemis mission. And one of my subsystems that I helped through design, through installation, was the crew access arm, which if many of you have seen the Apollo movies, it's the walkway where the astronauts walk from the tower all the way through to the space vehicle. That was my project. And so it's very exciting, and I love being a project engineer. And now I'm doing more integration on the back end because I just finished that project. So now I'm actually working with the contractors. We have so many contractors on site that are helping to make this mission possible, doing processing and operations. And so I help become the voice of engineering to help them with their performance and to gather data and to be able to put out there how we can become a better engineering team. And so it's very, very interesting, very amazing what we're doing. And I'm just so excited to be a part of this team.
Thank you, Yvette. You know, I'm wearing my Apollo schematic dress in honor. Now let's move on to Elijah Spiro, please.
Hi, yeah, my name is Elijah Spiro. I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, and a little over 2 years ago, I moved to Florida to start working at Kennedy Space Center. So the way I contribute to the Artemis mission is I'm a software engineer, so I write code for the launch control system that we're going to use to put the Space Launch System rocket up into orbit and beyond. So my job kind of involves the planning phase where we plan together all the subsystems of the launch control system code and how they're going to work together. Of course, I write the code, and then I sustain the code. So I go and I diagnose these bugs that we find, and I do everything I can to make sure we've got the most the safest piece of software that we can possibly have for these mission critical steps when we're eventually going to have human astronauts on board that we need to keep safe and protect throughout their mission. So I'm grateful to be working at NASA, and I'm grateful to be a part of this panel today.
Thank you, Elijah. Now, if we could have Wesley Dennis.
I'm Wesley Dennis. I'm an aerospace engineer, and I grew up in Orlando, Florida. The way I'm supporting the Artemis missions, believe it or not, is I'm kind of all across the board. I'm working in integrative operations, which is formally modeling and simulation. And what we're doing two main things. We actually have a virtual reality lab, which sounds, kind of weird. It's virtual reality. What does it have to do with space? Well, we learned that we could utilize the virtual environment to test out a bunch of ground critical operations before the operations actually take place. So we assist technicians with learning how to operate and perform tasks around hazardous equipment without the dangers of being, around hazardous equipment. So when it's time to process the rocket and get it ready for launch, they can do that. We're also supporting the certification of flight readiness, the COFR status, by creating tools and plans to ensure surveillance over all the systems. So when it's time for the engineering director to give the go to launch, he can safely do that, knowing that, everything is all secure and it's been checked. That's how I help contribute.
Awesome. Thank you, Wesley. And last but not least, please introduce yourself, Jessica Wood.
Hello, my name is Jessica Wood. I grew up in New Mexico, and I am now an aerospace engineer at the Marshall Space Flight Center in Huntsville, Alabama. I work for Marshall, but I am remotely located at the Aerojet Rocketdyne facility in Los Angeles, California. And at that site where they build the RS-25 rocket engine, I support the Artemis mission in the launch vehicle. So each of the Space Launch System launch vehicles has 4 RS-25 engines that propel the vehicle off the ground and into space. And my job working for the Space Launch System, and specifically the Liquid Engines office, is to work directly on site with the folks that are building these rocket engines to make sure that we're building the rocket engines in a way that meet all of our technical requirements. These are just incredibly complex pieces of hardware, and there's so much that goes into them. To me, it's very exciting to see the actual manufacturing process and work on making sure that not only we're meeting our technical requirements, but also making sure that we're building the engine to meet our cost and schedule goals too. We're always looking for new ways to use advanced manufacturing techniques to make the rocket engines better and faster. Back to you.
Awesome, thank you. Welcome to all of our panelists. So let's jump right into questions. Yvette, do you mind sharing with us what excites you about this mission?
I get so excited just knowing that we're going back into an exploration mindset, because that mindset really happened before my time. I joined NASA when I was, when we were in the shuttle program. And so it was more about building the space station. And so we were in construction mode. But now to actually go back to going to the moon and then possibility of going to Mars, and that's exciting stuff. That's stuff that I would read about in comic books and see in sci-fi movies. And to know that I am now contributing to that, to a little piece of that, is something that just motivates me and excites me. And I love sharing what I do because of that, because it gives me an opportunity to also excite and motivate maybe someone out there.
Awesome. I feel the energy made me excited. Elijah, can you tell us what excites you about the mission?
I think to build off what Yvette was saying, we were definitely born, after a lot of our world was already explored and documented. So in a lot of ways, it's kind of felt like we're standing on the shoulders of giants, but we don't have the means to contribute to that exploration purpose ourselves. Until recently, when I joined the NASA mission, I think, all humans have this drive to discover new things about the universe we live in, understand our place in it. And so I'm just excited at the prospect of getting to be that modern day explorer, getting to see things that no human has seen before and discover these new pieces of information. I'm obsessed with outer space. I go outside every night and I look up at the stars. And so just getting to make a career out of helping to explore that and, expand the human knowledge around the things that I'm so fascinated by, I just feel incredibly lucky, and it motivates me every day to do the best job I can.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yvette mentioned earlier about just, when Apollo happened, we weren't quite here yet. So if you think 10 years from now, I'm going to focus this question to Jessica. If you think 10 years from now, what do you hope the lasting impact of the Artemis mission is?
My hope is that with succeeding with landing on the moon, establishing Gateway and that presence in space, that NASA is able to kind of learn the lessons of how to survive for longer periods of time in space and deep space. We've established that that experience in low Earth orbit, but getting further away is going to be such an enabler for that kind of that spirit of exploration that Elijah talked about, that there's so much to learn, and without going forward and establishing that deeper space presence, I think that there's a lot of lessons that we just won't be able to learn that are necessary for going on to Mars and deeper space, which I think just totally plays into that kind of innately human characteristic of exploration and curiosity.
Awesome. We're full of curiosity. Wesley, from your perspective, what do you see 10 years from now? What do you hope is that lasting impact?
Well, I have some high hopes for the Artemis missions. And I hope the lasting impact is similar to the one moment when the astronauts were looking back from the moon on Earth, looking back from the moon at Earth as one united, world. And I know all, like, deep down in everyone, okay, there is the, the spirit of exploring and, going out and into uncharted territory. I hope the lasting impact will be not just that we were able to explore and, get to Mars, okay, and establish a permanent base on the moon. Not just that we were able to do all of that. I want the lasting impact to be that we were able to do this united as one race. I notice nowadays, the world is kind of divided, but luckily, when we look at space, we kind of look at it internationally, as one front together. And I hope the Artemis missions brings the world together, okay, by, bringing us all to the moon, I guess, so to speak.
Love it. Love it. One final question. I'll go to all of the panelists, starting with Yvette. But based upon your personal journey, what advice would you give to NASA collaborators about how they can inspire students? Let me start with Elijah. Elijah, if you don't mind sharing with us based upon your personal journey.
Yeah, I was fortunate enough to be able to complete a whole series of NASA internships that really inspired me. So I'd say one way that, as an educator, you can give back to the community and sort of encourage this STEM mindset in young students would be to take on a student, whether it's in an official mentoring capacity or otherwise. When I first was getting interested in STEM research, one of my professors in college, she took me under her wing and she brought me on as an independent researcher for some of her astronomy work. And that led down a whole road of eventually working on a senior thesis and getting published. So I think more than anything, it's just a matter of identifying which students are interested in the material to begin with, and then planting that seed and really working with them, in some cases individually, one-on-one, just nurture that desire to explore. I think a lot of students aren't necessarily aware of the fact that you can get paid to have a career in this kind of work. So that was sort of an epiphany I had midway through college, that I could make a career out of this stuff, and it all led from there. So I'd say, as an educator, definitely try to find those students who you think are particularly interested and give them some guidance, because you never know when they might need it.
Awesome. That's really great. I appreciate that. And a great little plug for internships. Wesley, based upon your personal journey, what advice would you give to NASA collaborators?
On the idea of inspiring young to go into the space field, the curiosity I've noticed is already there. I've done a number of outreach, and one of the most amazing things is going to middle school and elementary school and teaching them about space. And you don't even have to get too technical. Just showing them pictures of like the rockets and the crawler and all that gets them all interested. And you have to, I guess, based on my experience, what inspired me, is the limitless possibilities, I would say, that come with space exploration. Having someone tell me, instead of you can't do this, have someone tell me that it can be done. The optimism. And I would encourage I would encourage potential educators, to continue to try to push, for students to go after their dreams. And if they're working, and if they choose to work in a STEM field, to continue to, be persistent. I did actually 3 internships, and I kept working hard, and eventually I was able to get in that way. So it's just the spirit of never give up, no matter what type of adversities you end up encountering.
Thank you. We're going to close out with Jessica and Yvette in our last quick minutes. If you could share with us based upon your experience. Starting with Jessica.
Okay. I think that a couple things that are super important to being more inclusive in the space arena. One is that it takes so many disciplines and skill sets in order to pull something off like Artemis. And so really helping younger folks identify what their strengths are and then channel those strengths into specific areas, because everyone has key qualities that are unique to them that can help us achieve these goals, whether it be communication skills, math skills, all of those things. And then the second is to really foster that sense of curiosity about the world. I think that sense of childlike wonder is something that we have the blessing of working with every day with what we do. And I think that spirit and that attitude is something that really contributes to us being able to meet our mission, and is something that especially younger folks can bring.
Awesome. Yvette?
Well, what I would tell NASA collaborators is that the next generation of astronauts, explorers are in their classrooms. I mean, I was inspired to work for NASA because a teacher told me that, hey, if you apply yourself, you can work for NASA. And that planted a seed. And that was all that he had to do. That planted a seed, and it was just like right there, like, I can do this. And that inspiration happens in the classroom every day. And so I would tell them, you know, you hold a very important part of the future success of the space program, and it's in innovating your students, whoever you encounter. It's not about special privileges. I mean, most of us didn't do anything didn't go to any outrageous schools or have any special, you know, a training of any sort. We literally just worked hard, and we had passion, and we had drive, and we were motivated. And that is so important. And that ability to inspire and to plant that seed, to have students be able to know how to work in a team, to know how to adapt with different personalities, all of that is needed. I mean, we're all going to retire by the time we go to Mars. So the next people that will invent the technology and who will actually visit Mars are out there. They're right there. And so it's so important that seed gets planted as early as possible, that there's nothing that they can't accomplish, and they're the future and the success of this program.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank our panelists today for sharing your passion, your creativity, and the incredible work that you're doing. So thank you to you all, and I want to turn it back over to Katie and Rob.
Hey, welcome back, everyone. We are now joined live by our Artemis stars. So let's take some questions from the IO conference tool. For those in the audience, it's at arc.cnf.io. And remember to select Engaging the Artemis Generation Forum. So let's start with our first question for our group. How did internships or other experiences help you during your STEM journey?
I'll answer that one.
Thanks, Yvette.
So for me, they were so important. My first internship was actually at the college level. I was probably a sophomore when I heard of another person that actually did an internship at NASA. And to me at that time, I didn't even know that was possible. So to be able to talk to this person and know that there was this opportunity was just so exciting. So I applied. I got accepted at the Kennedy Space Center. And what that did, it just confirmed, one, that what I was studying was the right thing that I wanted to do, that I was on the right path. But then also it just ignited this fire in me that I really wanted to work for the space program. I got to see my first launch. It just opened my eyes, because, you know, throughout college, I was just all in the textbooks and in the class projects, but now I got to apply most of that learning in the real world. And it just made me that much more determined, that much more passionate to just give it my all to graduate, so that I can actually set foot and become one of these workers that I had the opportunity of working with during my internship. It was a fantastic opportunity to just reaffirm that that I had chosen well, and this is what I wanted to do.
Great, thank you.
And I took a different path that I think is a little bit less familiar. I came on to NASA as working for a large government contractor, which is a great path just to get your foot in the door and get some experience. And then I worked for a small company for 10 years, a 4-person company, still doing direct NASA work, and I got a ton of good experience. The other piece of advice I would have is that you don't necessarily need a technical degree to work for NASA. While I was going through school, I also went through a technical program to get a welding certificate. And having that hands-on experience opened so many doors in my career now in engineering and program management. And so thinking about kind of more non-traditional type methods of getting to NASA can really set you apart and be a huge value added throughout your career.
Thanks. How about Wesley or Elijah?
I'll go, and that is in terms of internships. I think one of the big ways those helped me out in my STEM field is it helped give me more of a direction in terms of what I should be focusing on. I went to school for aerospace engineering, and then I took a internship actually with NASA at the college level. And after taking that internship, it opened my mind with some of the things that industry has been looking for in the field. So it helped me to focus on, stuff like programming, which is what is being largely sought after as well. So it kind of helped give me that direction and helped me prepare for the job hiring process by understanding what companies are looking for.
Thank you.
I think I can maybe build on that just a little bit. In school, even within whatever field or major you decide to concentrate your studies, we're kind of overloaded with a lot of information that may or may not eventually relate to whatever career we end up deciding to work towards. So getting that experience midway through college to go and see, which of these particular classes are going to be most important to the field that you end up working in. For me, at least, it gave me really good motivation when I did get back to school to, not to blow off certain classes, but to care more about the ones that I knew or thought I knew I'd be using more than others. If you're going to end up writing code, does differential equations really matter? For me, not so much, but depending on what internship you take and that kind of experience you get, you might be able to narrow down where you want to put most of your focus in school.
Outstanding, outstanding. We've got just a few minutes left, but what message would you share directly with the Artemis generation from your perspective and your experience?
I'll start again. I think what I would really like to put out there is that they are a part of history, and it's such an exciting time right now to get involved. And like I had said previously, by the time the Artemis vision, the path forward is fulfilled that we get to Mars, us who are here, we're going to be close to retiring. So we need this young generation to jump forward, to step in and fill our shoes. And so it's such an exciting time to get involved. Ask how you can get involved. There's so many opportunities out there, and they're available for you. And so that would be my advice. Ask, and also don't be afraid to be a part of history and do something exciting.
Sounds great. Wesley looks like his wheels are turning, so let's hear from Wesley.
I would go ahead and encourage, getting into a STEM field. And there are lots more STEM fields out there than you think, too. It's not, just engineering and, mathematics. Right now, for the Artemis generation, we can use, biomechanical engineering. That's a big one. Some more biomedical sciences, computer science, electrical engineers. These are all fields that are going to be opening up and are going to become very, very much the foundation for what mankind's future space endeavor is going to be built on. So I would encourage, diving deep into those fields. And believe it or not, the pathway there may not be as, I would say, it may not be as restrictive as you think, too, because, even people who are interested in stuff like, video games, software development, and, virtual reality, all of that technology has a place, too. And right now we're leveraging pretty much knowledge from many areas to help fulfill the Artemis dream. So again, choose a STEM major if you can, okay? And they're also very stable in the job market too, and pay really well.
All righty, thanks, Wesley. Well, we've got about a minute left for our session, so I'd like to hear 30 seconds from Jessica and Elijah on what advice you would give for the Artemis generation. So we'll start with you, Jessica.
Okay. My advice would be kind of going off of my previous answer to recognize your strengths and realizing that there's many different paths to contribute and to work in the space industry. And that doesn't necessarily have to be a cookie cutter path, and feeling a great sense of confidence in the strengths that you bring. And if you find yourself in an environment where you're the only one of you, then that doesn't mean you don't belong. That means that that group extra special needs your contributions.
Thank you. Elijah, we'll finish up with you.
Well, at the risk of sounding a little cheesy, my first piece of advice here would just be to believe in yourself. It's more difficult without the right kind of mentor showing you the path, but if you work hard enough, you really can achieve whatever you want to. And my second piece of advice would be, just because NASA in particular, or a federal civil servant position might be a little bit, going against a little bit what Wesley was saying, it might be a little bit restrictive just because there's only so many slots that are open at a given time. The beauty of where we are right now, partnering with all these private companies like SpaceX, Boeing, United Launch Alliance, we're really transitioning to a future here where we're involving the private sector more than we've ever done before. And I have a feeling, it's going to continue on that path. So if you can't get into a civil servant position right out of college, don't fret. There's so many private sector equivalent jobs that you can take. And like Jessica was saying, you can transition to federal service later if that's what you're interested in. But oftentimes these jobs are just as exciting on the private side of things.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much to our Artemis stars for that great discussion. And clearly the Artemis mission is in very capable hands. And, we just want to thank you all for being at the forefront of NASA's work and leading the Artemis generation, not only in the work that you do, but also as mentors and role models. Hey, I see Rob's back with us, and it feels like a good time to take a short break. During the break, we're going to introduce you to Perseverance, our next robotic mission to Mars, and Perseverance is scheduled for launch this summer. So thanks, everyone, and we'll see you back in just a moment. Rob?
After this video on Perseverance, please take a moment to give us a little feedback using a QR code that we will show on the screen. It will work in the same way as the pre-event QR code, but it will take you to a different link. We'll also share this code again at the end of the program to get your feedback and ideas on how to collaborate.
Thanks, everyone.
Believers.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
We are willing to do the hard things, to overcome the many challenges. This is what brings out the best in us.
We go for a mission to the moon.
Our path has led to success and to bitter losses.
We come together today to mourn the loss of 7 brave Americans.
Yet, even when faced with tragedy and setbacks, we persevere. We keep striving. We keep believing. From space, we see our planet as a whole. We see the challenges facing it, and we face those challenges together. We will not give up. We challenge convention. We refuse to accept the status quo. The time at hand is hard, but we will persevere. We can still draw hope from the moon and the stars, from space, from exploration. There is a new day beyond the challenges we face now.
Curiosity, insight, spirit, opportunity. If you think about it, all of these names of past Mars rovers are qualities we possess as humans.
10, 9, we have ignition sequence start.
But if rovers are to be the qualities of us as a race, we missed the most important thing.
3, 2,
perseverance.
Launch commit, liftoff. We have liftoff.
We are a species of explorers. We will meet many obstacles on our way to Mars. But as humans, will not give up. We will always persevere.
Everyone. Our next topic is a conversation with some of NASA's stellar awardees and external collaborators who are currently engaging a broad and diverse group of K-12 students in STEM through a variety of approaches.
I would now like to introduce Elaine Ho, Deputy Associate Administrator for STEM Engagement. Elaine is responsible for OSTEM's portfolio of investments that reach both K-12 and higher education students. Prior to joining NASA, Elaine served as the Deputy Chief of Staff for the IRS and also served as a White House Senior Policy Advisor in Michelle Obama's office. In addition to NASA duties, she is a Lieutenant Colonel in the Air Force Reserve and supports diversity and inclusion efforts with the Judge Advocate General's Corps.
Similar to the session prior to the break, the discussion between Elaine and our collaborators was pre-recorded. Our collaborators were unable to join us today to take questions live. If you have questions, please email us at nasaedpartners@nasa.gov. And we will be compiling all the questions, working with our collaborators, and then posting an FAQ for the answers to those. So, Rob?
Let's go to the session.
Sounds great.
Elaine Ho, I'm the Deputy Associate Administrator for STEM Engagement here at NASA, and I want to thank you all for your participation today in this discussion. Today we've got a great panel lined up for you that represents a cross-section of both NASA grantees and unfunded collaborators who are engaging K-12 students in a wide variety of settings. The panelists that you're going to hear from today are here because they have engaged with students in a really exciting and inspiring way using STEM content, and they've managed to leverage NASA mission content to engage students while keeping at the forefront something that we all care about around equity, diversity, and inclusion. So with that, I am actually going to kick this off with the first question to our panelists, and I would like each one of you to introduce yourselves, if you could share your name and your title and your organization. And in about 60 to 90 seconds, which I'm sure is going to be challenging given the amazing work that you do, can you just tell us a bit about what your organization does and specifically around its work in doing that K-12 education and workforce development piece? So Tomas, do you want to go ahead and lead us off?
So my name is Tomas Gonzalez-Torres. I am the director of the Iowa Space Grant Consortium at Iowa State University, is where we're housed, but it's for the entire state. So the Iowa Space Grant is one of 52 consortia across the entire United States, of which are all supported by NASA. The consortia, 52 consortia, all work hand in hand with NASA that promote and support, including monetarily, internships, STEM education, research, and education at all different levels. We try to focus on the pipeline of future NASA employees, as well as future NASA researchers, helping NASA solve problems in space, aeronautics, Earth and planetary science, and many other areas. And of course, as NASA's focus changes, so does ours. Right now, of course, the focus is the moon and Artemis. And so we try to change the things that we support to focus around that new focus of NASA as well. Additionally, in order for to try to focus a little more on the K through 12 areas, Iowa has created a special position, which we call the Assistant Director for Education Outreach, and that's Sarah Nelson, which you will hear with soon.
Sarah, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure, I'm Sarah Nelson. I am the Assistant Director for Education and Outreach for the Iowa Space Grant Consortium. I also, on my appointment, work with Iowa 4-H Youth Development as their state STEM lead, and also with the Iowa State School of Education in science and literacy education. So I have a very unique and wonderful position in that I can help a lot of people get excited, about NASA and NASA's work, but then also about STEM education. And so that's basically my position. And really the goal is to create, collaboratives and relationships and a wonderful STEM ecosystem here in Iowa.
I'm so glad you're here. Teresa, why don't you go next?
My name is Teresa Drew. I'm the Associate Director of the STEM Next Opportunity Fund. We are a national nonprofit dedicated to bringing high-quality STEM learning to millions of young people and closing the gender gap in STEM. Our efforts build on 2 decades of work by the Noyce Foundation to build the capacity of the out-of-school field to deliver high-quality STEM training and learning. We know that from research that STEM activities delivered in out-of-school programs get kids engaged and interested, builds their identity as scientists and engineers, gives them ideas about possible careers, and it helps them to learn to persist in their STEM experiences and courses. And this is especially true for girls and youth of color. We are embarking on a national movement called the Million Girls Moonshot. It's perfect match with Artemis mission. It aims to empower 1 million girls with an engineering mindset, which is really a set of values, attitudes, and knowledge that will inspire the next generation of innovators. The Million Girls Moonshot leverages a robust national network of after-school and summer programs, reaching more than 10 million youth and 100,000 programs collectively, equipping these educators with innovative tools and content to engage girls, youth of color in STEM learning.
Thank you, Teresa. I can't wait to hear more about the Million Girls Moonshot. Naz, go ahead. Why don't you go next?
Yes, greetings from New York City. I'm from York College, part of the City University of New York, and I have been associated with NASA program since 2005. So I have about 15 years, with NASA STEM K1 through 12 program. We graduated about 28,000 students since the inception of the program, and we have 1 known PhD from the program already. So I have the privilege, to direct the program for so many years, and I feel very fortunate that through the NASA program and also the corporate sponsorship, we are able to provide quality education to the underserved students in Queens, New York City. By the way, Queens is considered to be one of the most diverse counties in the United States, and of course, after Los Angeles. So we're very happy that these things are happening here. We just started our summer session, completely sold out, and it is 100% virtual. So we'd like to thank NASA for allowing us to fulfill the mission, which is the same as the York College mission, to inspire students and become passionate and engaged learners. And I'm happy to report to you. Thank you.
Well, Naz, we're looking forward to hearing more for sure. And so last and certainly not least, Sam, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yes, hi, Sam Jimenez. I'm a space architect talking to you from San Antonio, Texas. And I'm the chairman of the board of the WEX Foundation. We started out with a community-based program here in San Antonio to get San Antonio known as a space community by starting into the K-12 school system and bringing our students into a program called LCATS, Lunar Caves Analog Test Sites. And in that program, what we do is we take an actual lunar-based development program that's being done by commercial companies, and we mimic it to our student curriculum so they feel like they're working on a real program as consultants to that actual program. And so that became very successful. And then we ended up receiving some support from NASA to go a little bit national with the idea. And now we're reaching out to approximately 40,000 students through the Communities and Schools Network and developing space clubs in communities, not just urban areas, but also rural areas around the nation. And what we'll do is we'll have this coming year, it will be a lunar-based competition. Not lunar-based, lunar cities competition. So now we're trying to get our students to look not just for the base and the very first things you do when you go out there and establish a lunar base, but what's it going to look like way in the future when they're up at our age, basically, and envision what that looks like as a city. So that'll be the national competition, and we're looking forward to getting that implemented. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Sam. Again, looking forward to hearing more about the work the Lens Foundation is doing, and certainly more about building a city competition. So let's dive into some of the questions that we have for you. As a number of you mentioned, looking to link some of the work that you're doing with lunar-based things with the Artemis program, and certainly we at NASA are very much focused on seeing the incredible potential that the Artemis program has from an education perspective. And so we'd like to tap into your wisdom. So Tomas and Sarah and Sam, I'm going to throw this question to you all. You know, from your perspective, how might organizations across the country use something like Artemis to motivate and inspire students? So, you know, Tomas and Sarah, maybe you could start and tell us how you all, through the Iowa Space Grant Consortium, are linking Artemis to opportunities that you all are doing for K-12 students across your state.
Okay. I'll start with a few interesting little facts, I guess. So I wanted to make sure to state that we have actually had a continuous human presence in space since October 31st of 2000. So it's almost 20 years now. And it's interesting that anybody who has been born after that date has lived in a world where two truths. First, there has always been someone living in space since they were born. That's just very interesting. And then also, during their entire lifetimes, not all humans have lived on planet Earth at the same time. So before moving back to Iowa, I actually had the privilege of working for NASA for 22 years, including being a mission control flight director. And it's amazing to see the International Space Station flying overhead, brightest star up there. You can Google how you can find it. Now we're going back to the moon to stay. We're going to be building infrastructure, and each Artemis mission is actually going to build on the prior one. And so we look and we think about motivation, but space and NASA in and of itself is motivating. So it's really how we can make that connection. You know, the first thing that I always think about is we have to tell people what NASA is doing. You know, and it's not just the fact that we're going to the moon, but what are the details of that, right? So tell everybody, tell teachers, parents, grandparents, so they tell kids and their students. And then more importantly, how can those students and kids be a part of that, right? And so there are NASA challenges that NASA puts out, and it's all through various age groups. And it needs to be clear to the students that those challenges, our actual challenge that either NASA has had, and they're examples for the younger kids of types of projects that they can try and solve just like NASA did, or they are actual challenges that NASA has now that they actually need help with, right? And so those are kind of the high school and even at college levels, they actually need help to solve those problems. And so trying to make that connection and explore and let the students actually help out, I think that is very motivational for students. One last thing, it's before I think Sarah has a lot more to add to that, but In the not too distant future, there will also be a generation that has never known a time when there hasn't been a continuous human presence living on the moon, and then also a time when humans haven't been on Mars, right? So.
Very cool. Thanks, Tomas. Sarah, you want to add to that?
Yeah, we have just been talking about how can we get youth involved and be a part of this story. How can we make them be a part of this Artemis mission? And so we're looking at different ways to build relationships between school and informal education, business, families, you name it, so that if I go to school and I learn about Artemis, and then I go to my after school or out of school program, I learn more about Artemis, and then I go home and I'm even more excited. And so we create these connections between those. So we're developing programs that kind of cross all those boundaries. And really, to me, it's about collaboration so we can magnify our results and engage students at a deeper level. But really, it's about their STEM story and making them want to be a part of this mission so that when it happens, they are there with us, excited, engaged, everybody is kind of right there with us. So we've looked at programs. I'll give one example called Flex Space Artemis. And what it is it's a virtual reality, augmented reality experience around Artemis. It's currently in development, almost done. And what it is the equipment for it travels around the state in a trailer so that we can open up access to more youth to these experiences. And it's really supported by a bunch of different STEM stakeholders. So again, it's getting people a chance to be a part of this story, to have it be something that they are engaged and excited with at different levels, at different grades, just kind of infusing it into everything. And so we're really excited here, as you can tell.
Yes, that's a very comprehensive approach you all have. I can't wait to see the VR goggles when they come out. Sam, what about you? You talked about your Lunar Cities competition. How do you weave NASA content into some of your national competitions like that?
So we have a philosophy of a collaboration from our expert scientists, mentoring our graduate students, to mentor our high school students, to then reach out to the elementary K-12 community as well. And we have a hands-on approach to our projects. We actually want to get one of our projects on the lunar surface itself. So we're developing actual technology through this layered approach of development. Where we have, for example, we have a lunar dust instrument we're trying to develop right now, and have actually made proposals to NASA and to other organizations for getting on the CLIPS mission, for example. And that's part of the community. What we say, San Antonio has a space program itself, and we're trying to get it onto the lunar surface, and we try to get hands-on approach to that as well. Now, when we go to our New Worlds of Wet You program, which is our national program, we want to take that same sort of model and, again, bring in the community to believe that they're part of the Artemis program, that they're going to be able to be a part of the reach back to the lunar surface as well.
Thanks so much to all of you there. Yeah, no, I heard a lot of partnership and collaboration to make sure that what you're doing is linking to that Artemis excitement that Sarah was talking about. Let me shift to the next question and talk about something that I've teed up in the introduction, where NASA and certainly all of you have a intentional focus around seeing how your programs can ensure that we're reaching the students who are underserved and underrepresented to really build that diversity and inclusion pathways into STEM. And so I'd like to put this question out to Teresa and to Naz. Teresa, you mentioned the Million Girls Moonshot. It's an opportunity embedded in the name that's around equity, diversity, and inclusion. Can you tell us a bit about the guiding strategy and the framework that you've developed for this effort?
Yeah, thanks. Well, we're really taking a systemic approach with this initiative to reimagine who can be an engineer. And it's really transforming that pathway for students, especially those who have historically been left out of the STEM field, to become those innovators and inventors and, the astronauts who are going to the moon and beyond. It's so exciting. I'm ready to jump on your ship right now and go with you. It's so exciting. But for us, this means that we're really thinking about engaging girls throughout their youth in consistent, high-quality STEM programming. We want to make sure that there's an engineering mindset embedded into all STEM programming. We're creating the pathways and transition points between those opportunities, both in and out of school, and that we're really fostering the sustained involvement of the families and communities, role models and mentors, which we know from research are so critical to engaging those students who have been left out of the STEM economy. We want to ensure that that girl, like Sarah mentioned, who was at a summer camp in middle school, she transitions into an academic support program, that she has a mentor that looks like her to help guide the way, and that her family and community are prepared to champion her efforts. But really, again, at its core, this is an effort, the Million Girls Moonshot is an effort about addressing the systemic barriers that exist for girls and youth of color to pursue their STEM interests. We're doing that primarily through, first and foremost, a strategy where we're activating an equity and an equity-focused lens through which STEM programs are developed, delivered, and promoted both in and out of school. And through the Million Girls Moonshot, we're collaborating, like I mentioned, with the 50-state after-school network to support the after-school and summer community to begin this mindset shift, which we know is so critical. And through our collaborative partnership with NASA, we'll be working to provide equity-focused, that's the key, high-quality STEM content to the after-school and summer community, paired with the professional development for the out-of-school time educators that we know is so critical.
Thanks, Teresa. I think, this issue has plagued us for so long, but I think I love the idea that you're addressing the mindset along with the whole comprehensive piece of it, and addressing the village that surrounds each girl. You can't just focus on just the girl, but all the pieces that surround it. So that's really inspiring to hear. Naz, what about you? We know you're doing amazing work with the Mira Aerospace Academy there in York College. Tell us a bit about the target audience that you're looking to draw into that program, and what are the factors that have led to your success in engaging those students who have been traditionally underrepresented in STEM?
Right. I'm going to piggyback what Teresa was mentioning, because a lot of things are in common what we do here in the urban setting in Queens, New York City. We also partner with the local PTA, Parent Teachers Association, Senior Center, Queens Public Library, and definitely some of the school districts. Our program is housed at York College, so we don't work directly, with the superintendent of the school, but we kind of reach out to them through some of the things I just mentioned about the PTA, Senior Citizen Center, and also some of the representatives from the local high school. The strength of our program, I can easily target on family focus group. They are so pivotal in terms of recruiting students and making sure that they're not just coming out here for only one session. So they keep coming. And there are students, they enter the program first grade, and I kind of track them. They are still coming when they're in high school setting. So we have a longitudinal tracking of some of these students. And that's the way, we found out our first PhD who took the program in 2000 as a 6th grade student. And she graduated from Duke University. So, it talks very highly about the success of the program. So currently, to make it more stronger, to meet the demands, of the current scientific expedition, we are allowing some 15 to 20 high school students to receive peer mentoring, in addition to regular STEM activities. So they will be coming every semester, and they will be, working on a mini research project. Could be coding, could be robotics, could be engineering design, whatever they like to work with us. So this opens up some new windows for some of the high schoolers in the city when they have, not a major thing, available to them, to spend time on quality education, especially this summer. I mean, that's why we're sold out. And we have 100+ high school students as opposed to what we used to get like 40 or 50. So I think these are the strengths we have, and we like to maintain it. And I think the outcome should be very, pleasant. Hopefully, we'll reach milestone. Thank you.
The demand is high for that work, that amazing work that you're doing, Naz, and I love the emphasis that you talked about in mentoring, because we know that's so critical for students to really make it through. And I have to say, as a Duke alum, go Blue Devils! So that's great news. So let me shift now to ask a question. You mentioned, especially this summer, with the challenges of COVID-19. I think not only it will impact what we're seeing today, but I think it will really change the way that we're thinking about the work that we're doing and how we leverage technology. So, Tomas and Sarah, let me ask you, and then turn to Naz. How are your organizations thinking about or already starting to leverage technology to reach students, or how has COVID-19 impacted that work that you're doing to change the way that you're approaching this?
Sure. I'll go ahead and start. But we're very lucky that we are living in a very technologically advanced time frame, because when COVID began, we had the opportunity to actually go virtual. Right. The biggest thing, though, that I have been seeing is also we can't forget that it's not 100%, and so not everybody has that same technology. And so I think it's great. I've been seeing schools that actually will loan out hotspots to provide the internet to some homes that may not have it, as well as loaning out laptops. Again, Sarah can talk about the specific projects she has done. But some of the videos right off the bat, she started making some phenomenal videos that, went crazy and blasted everywhere and had some great information. But I think the best part of those videos was also that it had kind of like an instructional video aspect, but then also printouts. And so you can actually print those out at any point and put them in packets and hand them to schools, to libraries, and share those across, a wide variety of areas. And then we also have a really good STEM network. And so this was the time that we were able to reach out to them. So, begin to develop that STEM network now. And when you really need it, it's there and ready to go for you and available. And then there's also these other groups like NASA, or that, Sarah was talking about, the Flex program with the van. Again, in a very rural state like Iowa, there are many areas, again, that may not have all the internet capabilities. And so we have this van that can actually go out, and imagine kids in a small town of, 100 people, and they're putting on virtual, reality goggles, and they're seeing, the moon, the prior Apollo landing sites, or the new, Artemis landing sites. And so this has been a great opportunity to combine that and really try to move forward with that technology.
Sarah, did you want to follow up to that?
Yeah, sure. I might just add a few examples on, whenever we are developing these blended learning programs, we always first check on access, to the technology that we want to use. And if it's not available, how can we support, anybody in getting access to that, or what do we need to change? But then also creating programs that are still active STEM processes, not passive. And so a few things that we've done are just, of course, STEM camps, both synchronous and asynchronous. We've connected youth to NASA engineers and scientists, over different platforms. One new one we're going to try is creating mini text courses. So the course is all over text, and so we'll see how that one goes. But, again, just using technology to reach more and more people. But then if it's not available or the access isn't there, what are some steps we can take to still make sure everybody does have access to these things? So all of the things we push out are kind of on multiple platforms and available in multiple formats too. But the last thing is, just creating STEM community with technology. We had a little watch party for the recent launch, and I remember my girls were sitting right next to me too during our launch party, and just them and all of their friends engaging in this, it's building that STEM community and leveraging technology to help with that also. So again, a few examples, but always happy to share more if anybody would ever like to learn more too.
Thank you for those examples, because what I think I've heard every single time is the technology is really helpful, but you need the non-technology pieces, around it to really make it happen, whether it's the actual connections with the networks, or whether it's the packet that goes with the videos. So those are all great examples of how you really using the technology, not just by itself, but as a vehicle to get that content out there. Naz, what about you in terms of, you mentioned some things already that you've gone all virtual. Any other strategies you want to talk about in terms of how these impacts of COVID-19 might have changed your approach and your using technology?
Sure. I believe that the COVID-19 pandemic crisis brought new dimension to us and forced us to go out of the box and do something which will be, never been practiced. And we did that. 3 weeks of our end of the last spring session. Success, was, I consider maybe moderate, because the first time we did that. But then this summer, as I see from the enrollment, oversold. That means everyone is coming back to attend this. And I like to attribute this success to New York City Department of Education, because they provided, they loaned almost like close to 300,000 iPad, tablets, and other technology need for the K1 through 12 students. So we leveraged on that. And plus some of these cool web videos from JPL, American Museum of Natural History, NASA Educators Online Network came to be very resourceful for us. Parents, students, they all used it. Even when we finished the program, parents were logging in to receive the professional certificate by attending those webinars on STEM education. Fantastic opportunity now. I mean, it's probably thanks to the COVID-19, unfortunately, right? Thank
That's
you.
right. As a parent, I too feel like I could get certified in homeschooling right now. So let me get to our last question, and I'm mindful of time so that we can leave a lot of time for a Q&A. So I know I started the first question of 90 seconds, 60 seconds around there. If I could close us out with a short snippet too in terms of your thoughts. There's folks here that are going to be participating and listening in and really wanting to know how can they plug into what you're doing? What resources or opportunities have you developed that the audience could plug into? And so Teresa and Sam, I'm going to throw that to you all. Teresa, with your Million Girls Moonshot, how can NASA collaborators and grantees connect with what you do?
Cool. Thanks, Elaine. And it's a great question. And you really set it up when you said this is we need a village. So the Million Girls Moonshot is a collective impact approach. At the national level, we're engaging partners to help us with our goal, but the after school networks at the state level are also activating their cross-sector partnerships to increase access and opportunity to the STEM pipeline across space and time. So this is really important. We need a lot of partners to do this. It's so important. We need this now more than ever. We need a diverse and empowered STEM talent to help us solve our challenges that we are facing every day. We need that groundswell of champions and allies who share the vision and the commitment to equity and inclusion and STEM. We welcome any of our, cross-sector partners. So community, funders, the politicians, you name it, K-12, in school, out of school. We need everybody to share in this effort. So I welcome you to reach out to me. You can explore the Million Girls Moonshot website, milliongirlsmoonshot.org. I would love to connect any of you, the NASA collaborators and partners, to the after-school networks where they're working in the States. They'll have a lot of resources, and together I know we could do some great things, and it's really exciting to be on this mission with NASA.
Thanks, Teresa. And Sam, I'll have to close it out with the same question. Given some of the things that you're doing in the Wex Foundation, particularly around your national student challenges, how can organizations connect with you?
So the competition is going to get kicked off in the fall timeframe. This will be a great time to engage with it. We'll be putting out announcements for the schools to become entrants into the competition, and that'll be a good opportunity to get your classrooms involved. But more important is I want to reach out to the parents of students. We're finding out that when we start these clubs, that we bring in a family night to get parents who have not had traditional STEM education or even that in their mindset, get them involved. And the parents, if you can become involved with your student and with these programs, then it really puts on a trajectory for your own child to be part of it as well. So that's where I think is the real collaborative part of it, is to begin with the parent in the home.
Great. Thank you so much, Sam. And thank you to all of you. I want to thank all the panels for just sharing their insight and their opportunities and their enthusiasm to really foster this next generation of this Artemis generation is what we're calling it. And, NASA can't do it alone. Each of you can't do it alone. I heard a lot about partnering and collaborating and tapping into networks, and that's really what it's all about. And I think that's really what's going to move the needle. So thank you again, and we'll turn it back to Katie and Rob for the Q&A session.
Wow, Rob, the passion and commitment to involving broad and diverse groups of students in authentic STEM experiences was so evident in that last discussion. We'd really like to thank Elaine and our collaborators for taking the time to share their stories with us today.
Our next session features perspectives from nationally recognized leaders in STEM education. They represent the students and teachers who are so critical in NASA achieving its long-term exploration goals. This session was moderated by Chris Brown, Deputy Associate Administrator for STEM Engagement. Chris is responsible for the development of cross-cutting strategy and policy for NASA's STEM engagement work. Chris began her career with NASA as an engineer at the Goddard Space Flight Center. During her time there, she led a wide array of both technical and strategic leadership efforts. Prior to joining the Office of STEM Engagement, Chris was Director of the Strategy and Integration Division in NASA's Office of Communications.
As with the previous session, this discussion was pre-recorded. Due to scheduling constraints, our guests were unable to join us today to field questions, but we will share your questions with them after the session. So with that, let's roll.
And welcome, everyone. Thanks so much for joining me today. I'm Chris Brown, Deputy Associate Administrator for STEM Engagement here at NASA. And I'm really thrilled to have all of you, members of our esteemed expert panel, to join me today in hearing from you about how we can best engage K through 12 students. As you know, this workshop is around Artemis, and we are looking to leverage this new exciting program to reach and engage students in elementary, middle, and high school. And so I want to thank you all for joining today. And to start the conversation, I'd like to begin with a challenge to all of you. I'd like to hear from each of you in introducing yourself and sharing how your organization supports STEM education, and it's seeing if you can do that in a minute or less. So with that, let's start with Dan.
Oh, challenge accepted. Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Dan Dumbacher, the Executive Director of the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics. And AIAA is the world's largest professional society for the aerospace profession, and we get involved with the K through 12 STEM activities from the standpoint of helping build the pipeline for the long-term workforce that we need to solve the aerospace challenges for the future. Our board has given us a challenge to reach and connect with 1 million K through 12 students per year. We're not there yet. We're working on getting to it. We do a lot of work with classroom grants, working with the teachers, micro lessons across the board, a lot of scholarships for undergrad and graduate work. And some of the near-term things we've just started include some hands-on experience of having students build payloads and design payloads for suborbital launch. We call it Go for Launch activity. We're collaborating with Blue Origin on a design build launch microgravity experiment competition. And we also work very closely with our educator associates around the country to help them provide them content for the classrooms. And then we always work to recognize the highest quality, and we give out awards each year, $5,000 to the teachers and $5,000 to their school for the good work that they do and the tremendously important work that we do. So AIAA, even though we are known for our professional society and dealing with the engineers at the top level, we are very focused as well on the K through 12 because of the critical nature of getting the pipeline built for the long-term workforce development.
Thanks, Dan. Elizabeth?
Hi, everybody. I'm Elizabeth Allen, and I'm the current president of the National Science Teaching Association. NSTA is the world's largest science education membership organization, and STEM is really at the heart of what we're for. We recognize that science teaching happens everywhere, in classrooms, at home, after school, in formal settings, and our mission is to be able to support high-quality science teaching so that all students have access to STEM and science education. Most of the ways that we do that is through supports for teachers, through our conferences, our resources that you find on our website, journals, awards, some of the things that Dan talked about also, but NSTA's core mission is to support the high quality science teaching that gives access to all students to be able to have STEM careers.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Norman?
Hi, I'm Norman Fortenberry, Executive Director of the American Society for Engineering Education. We are the Society for Academic Engineers. That means teachers and faculty in colleges, universities, P12, and continuing education. Our vision is excellent and broadly accessible education, empowering students and engineering professionals to create a better world. And to achieve that vision, we advance innovation, access, and excellence at all levels of education for the engineering profession. ASCE has long recognized the importance of P12 engineering education, and institutionally, we have two formal bodies devoted to P12 engineering education. Pre-college division, one of our society's largest, with hundreds of members involved in a range of endeavors, including, for example, such things as taking a key role in forming the National Academy of Engineering's Link Engineering website and the teachengineering.org site, which is based at the University of Colorado. In addition, the ASCE Board of Directors has a P12 Engineering Education Commission, which is dedicated to creating and expanding the ecosystem that supports practitioners, scholarships, and learning. In terms of workforce development, our P12 Commission develops standards for professional development of P12 engineering teachers and is now seeking to evaluate teacher professional development programs for their completeness for both pre-service teachers and current teachers. We also provide opportunities for P12 learning at our annual conference. Thanks.
Thanks, Norman. Patty?
Hi, Chris. Thank you. It's such a pleasure to be on this panel with some colleagues, old and new. My name is Patty Curtis, and I'm serving as the Robert Noyce Ellen Letvin STEM Education Fellow at the U.S. Department of Education. My sponsors are the STEMX Foundation and the Charles C. Mott Foundation. So I'll talk a little bit about both organizations. As you may know, the Department of Education is engaged in supporting elementary and secondary education, most of which is through congressional or statutory formula grants to serve primarily low-income school districts and students. And we have a number of programs that are designed to support diversity in STEM education, including the Upward Bound Math and Science program, Hispanic Serving Institution STEM program, the Minority Serving Engineering Improvement program, and some discretionary grants in which we deploy the Secretary's priority for STEM and computer science. We also have the Office of Career, Technical, and Adult Education, which is also has STEM pathways. So we're definitely supportive of the STEM pipeline and at the department. And my primary sponsor, the STEM Next Foundation, is long-term investments in after-school STEM and diversity around engaging minorities and girls in particular in the STEM fields. They have invested significantly in out-of-school time curricula, research around best practices, and advocacy.
Thanks so much, Patty. So the first question I have is I'd like to hear your perspectives on how we could collectively capitalize on the work that we do at NASA and with our partners to more effectively engage K through 12 students. And particularly with a focus on how do we reach the students who are the communities that have been historically underrepresented and underserved in STEM. So maybe we could start with you, Dan.
So a couple of thoughts on that, Chris, and thank you for the question. Excellent question. I think one of the things we see is the need and actually how well it engages the students when they are doing hands-on projects, hands-on experience, getting to build something. So as Artemis is building launch vehicles and payloads and landers for the moon and lunar habitats and all that kind of fun stuff, having design projects or competitions among the schools in the K through 12, appropriate for the K through 12 time frame, is being able to give them some of that hands-on experience. Let them feel like they're part of the team. Maybe even pull them use some of their ideas or some of their names or whatever it might be for involvement. I think it's really important, and I want to emphasize the need that we bring in and reach out to the underserved, underrepresented. We do things like our Diversity Scholars Program, where we reach into the HBCU arena and others so that we help build that pipeline, as we refer to it, and get a much more representative, a much more inclusive population into the mix. So hands-on, proactively and intentionally involving those that don't typically have involvement in this kind of activity, or they haven't had in the past, or haven't seen themselves in this, and make that intentional and give them the hands-on and get them connected with the people and the mentors. And we have multiple ways of doing that, but getting that connection is important.
Thanks, Dan. Yes, as an engineer that really grew up at NASA in my career here, I think that the whole notion of learning by doing is so critical, and helping to create opportunities for students to be able to have access to the learning by doing activities, I think, is something that we'd love to strive for. Patty, do you have thoughts on this as well?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree with Dan about the hands-on experiential learning. We know from research is really important for retention, engagement, et cetera. But I try to put on my middle school hat when I thought about, Artemis, and I thought about, my daughter's love for the Artemis Fowl series. So I think part of it might be just defining for kids, what is Artemis, who is Artemis, I don't know that they've gotten the Greek mythology and that she is Apollo's twin sister and, what her role is. So I think if we can capitalize on the fact that Artemis is a female, this is the first female woman to the moon, I think will help in really engaging some younger female students. I think the other thing too that's important is because of so much stress that's in the world right now between COVID and the racial injustice. We see kids marching in the street. So how can we make the science and the engineering of Artemis relevant to their daily lives? So what is it that the researchers and the scientists and engineers are doing that's going to make their lives better tomorrow? And how to make it more current, relevant, immediate. And then expanding on sort of the variety of job opportunities, right? It's not just the few select astronauts that are going into space, but it's all the people on the ground that are supporting that mission, those heroes, sheroes, to get there. So I think really making it local and accessible, not only via the technology, but in their minds. Like, this is something that I can do and I can contribute to. And it's important to me and my family and my community.
Thanks so much, Patty. Kind of building off of what you've just shared with us, we do need to recognize the huge dramatic shift in our landscape that has happened over the past few months. And we've got, as you said, Patty, COVID-19 and the educational system trying to navigate in this new space across the country, as well as you also mentioned the social justice movement and how that is influencing especially students' reactions to the world they live in. So I'm curious, building off of that and thinking about not just leveraging what NASA is doing, but how do we use technology and in providing more access to students with keeping in mind the digital divide. So I'd love to hear from you about how you see us being able to better leverage technology, and are there any trends that you feel are working right now that you'd like to share? So I'd like to start with Elizabeth, if that's okay.
Sure, that's really a great question and very timely. And I'll point out that, it's really interesting that when education was moved out of face-to-face into a virtual world so quickly, teachers did step up and make the very best decisions they could make for their students and did an outstanding job of completing that school year. So first of all, we need to recognize that teachers will do the very best that they can for their students. And at the same time, understand that at the point that this happened, the market got flooded with all sorts of resources that were questionable or overwhelming. So it wasn't at the time that teachers and parents did not have adequate resources. It was what resource? So the National Science Teaching Association has been moving digitally for the last 3 to 4 years and just opened up a brand new website that makes that digital presence so much more accessible for all teachers and parents and science educators. I think as we move forward, some of the things that we've done is produce daily do's, which are phenomenon-based activities that you can do virtually with your parent or a teacher, and they vary, and they ask questions like, why is a raindrop round? And so questions that are really interesting that can be done. I think as we move forward, those kind of activities are going to become critical, because we may find that some students are face-to-face and some students are virtual. So anything that we provide for teachers needs to recognize that they could be at any point a virtual versus a face-to-face, or some sort of a blended that goes back and forth. I think as we move forward with this, it'll be key to understanding that that this is all beginning to look very differently on our landscape. And we have an opportunity to take a hold of this and move it forward. And that digital divide is critically important. I think one of the things that we can do with our partners, including NASA, is take a look at how do we make, for the first time, people accessible to students who might not ever have seen astronauts or field technicians, and kind of playing off what Patty said earlier. It's a really great opportunity to say, these people are real, they look like us, they talk like us, and they may act like us, but they look like us. And so if you're wanting to reach underrepresented students, providing an opportunity to see those students virtually through webinars, through live talks, through the ability to reach out and actually touch a student at their home is significant, and an opportunity we've never had before. And I hope that we can all capitalize on that by working together to figure out how to get those people doing this work at NASA into the students' classrooms, into their homes, and into their living rooms.
Can I add something?
Sure, Patty.
I'm just thinking, kids are so adept at social media. That is one thing they seem to have plenty of access to. And I know NASA does a great job in that space too, but I think of, ways they can contribute via like TikTok videos, or, as Dan mentioned, competitions, or some, even tapping in their creative arts, whether it's a drawing contest or, what is their interpretation, I think would, certainly be engaging for kids, but also recognize the role of families. I've heard from so many, working parents that are also homeschooling all of a sudden. So how do we, make sure that the materials, the content is easily accessible and usable for families that are sort of filling in the gaps, whether kids are going back to a classroom or not in the fall. So keeping the role of families in mind as well, I think will be helpful.
Norman, would you like to weigh in on this? I know that you hold the perspective of education and engineering, and we still very much have a challenge in attracting underserved students in STEM into engineering and retaining them. So I was just curious if you have any thoughts on how we best leverage technology, especially during this time, to reach K through 12 and perhaps those earlier students in the earlier phases of their education, say K through 8, in an interest in engineering.
Sure. I think first when you talk about outreach, it's important to recognize and congratulate NASA on renaming its Washington, D.C. headquarters for Mary Jackson, the first African-American woman engineer at the agency. And I think that's a big step in terms of public recognition and role modeling. In terms of other uses of technology, one of the things that we were able to do at ASEE was to, in direct response to the pandemic and the shutdown, our members used Facebook to provide daily challenges that teachers and parents could use to supplement their lessons. And we also organized and led online summer camps. Camps featured a variety of topics, with most focusing on hands-on activities for the reasons that Dan and Patty both emphasized, and they relied on materials that could be found around the house. So I think tying it, ensuring to the maximum extent accessibility is a big thing, but also, as has been said, tying it to things that students can see in their life and in their environment is also important. So, for example, the ARTEMIS challenge around toilet design is something that, particularly as you mentioned for the younger kids, is something they're very familiar with, and to get them thinking about how to use toilets in different orientations or different environments is something that actually could be quite cool for them. And actually also for the older students, we'll have ground-based applications in terms of waterless toilet design for terrestrial use.
Yeah, that's a great example, Norman. I think having interesting ways of reaching students, especially where they are, and thinking about capitalizing really on interests and talents that students have, that they may not really think that doing something in STEM is for them. But as I've heard from you all, that having them have the ability to see themselves and see a role model is so powerful, and something that I know we're very committed to doing at NASA. We've got a whole workforce of scientists and engineers who are very invested in the legacy of inspiring people to follow in their footsteps. And it's a powerful strategy for us to really think more purposefully and deliberately about is how do we do that. So shifting a little bit, I'd love to hear from you about any advice that you would have really for any of us who are participating in this workshop around how do we maximize the potential of the work that we're doing in education and STEM. And that really goes back to how do we consider deriving outcomes, and also how do we more effectively, in a sense, look for ways to increase our return on investment. Let's start with Dan. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I have a few. As a longtime NASA employee, I want to start off with my favorite, particularly for NASA and its stakeholders, and that is please keep with the plan and stick with the plan and execute the plan. The one thing that will help STEM and help the students see a future for themselves will be continuous progress towards a future. Restarts and replans and cancellations are not productive on several fronts, and particularly on a STEM front. So I would wholeheartedly say keep on doing and keep making those progress, because that shows the students that there is a future for them. And also be more intentional about going out and reaching into those communities that don't typically get accessed. There are polytechnic schools or high schools around the country with engineering backgrounds that are in underserved, underrepresented areas, and we need to intentionally go work with those schools and help them get to the university level, and then build to the future. And then as I think at the younger age, back on my hands-on kind of experience, a little bit of an example is some fourth grade students in Indiana got to build themselves a payload to go on a suborbital launch to figure out if fireflies would actually light up while they were in orbit. All for the cost of less than a set of football uniforms for the football team that year. So I think it's important that we recognize the priority, that we recognize how important STEM is for not just now, but also for the long-term future. And we can rearrange our priorities at the school level to go get these kinds of hands-on experiences for the students, and we will build the base that way. So that way we're working across the entire pipeline.
That's awesome. Thanks, Dan. Norman?
I support everything that Dan said. What I would add is that once you're in a school, I think it's important before you get there to think through how the examples and the materials and the missions that you're drawing upon, how those align with the existing standards in the school. Teachers and even faculty are busy people, and so to make the stuff as easy as possible to use by showing the alignment with standards so that the teachers can fit it into their curricula is going to enhance the probability that it's actually used. Somebody can show up with a great, hey, here's a great example, here's a great thing that you can use. But if I know that I have a lesson plan that's supposed to go for the semester and I'm not quite sure where it fits, I'm not going to be able to use it. So to the degree that you can maximize the utility of the stuff that you're bringing into the school, I think that's a tremendous win.
Thanks, Norman. Elizabeth?
Well, I certainly agree with both the gentlemen before me, and I kind of want to piggyback a little bit on top of that and say I think the best way to reach the audience that you're trying to reach is to show up, and I mean that flippantly, but I don't really, in the sense that showing up means being able to be accessible to the teachers for the first time that may not have ever been able to show up at a conference and have a workshop, or have been able to travel to somewhere to a space camp. This is the chance we have to reach those populations that are serving the underrepresented groups. And I would say show up there and leverage the partnerships that NASA has with the 4 people who are sitting on this phone call and the dozen more agencies that NASA works directly with, to simply show up. If there's a local conference going on that's virtual for a state, showing up and letting people know what NASA has to offer is substantive, because the teacher in rural Minnesota may not know what NASA has to offer because they haven't had the opportunity to attend the workshops or the resources, or don't quite know what's going on out there. And this is an opportunity to really leverage it. I mean, this is our chance, right? This is a chance to use the opportunity that COVID-19 has given us and really think substantively about how we interact with teachers now. And so this is the great equalizer. This is the chance that we can use to reach these people. And I highly recommend that NASA shows up to these places and helps teachers, as Norman said. How do you integrate it into your classroom? By showing them that it works in their own classroom, in their own area. And I would also say at some point that we have to pay attention to local cultural differences so that the curriculum is relevant locally as well as nationally.
Great points, Elizabeth. Thanks so much for that. Patty?
Yeah, thank you. Of course, I would be remiss if we didn't focus on the out-of-school opportunities, right? Summer camps are going virtual. Museums and planetaria are offering online, activities for students. I love Elizabeth's comment about making it culturally relevant, right? If we really want to diversify the pipeline, we've got to make it accessible in not only in variety of languages, but in approaches to the environment. I think, keeping those sensitivities in mind would be helpful. The department has a tremendous program called the 21st Century Community Learning Centers. We already have a partnership with NASA to create engineering design challenges. So I'm hoping that bringing Artemis content would not be a difficult stretch. Also, the STEM Next Foundation is launching a Million Girls Moonshot initiative to engage 1 million girls over the next 5 years in an engineering design challenge and mindset. And we are grateful to partner with NASA on that initiative as well. And I think the other thing about sort of accessibility is, I mentioned social media, but I know especially like in Native communities and rural communities, that internet access is very spotty. And even if they get it, they may not have enough devices for access, especially in a large family, where parents are perhaps using the computer all day for work, and yet, there's 4 to 5 or more kids also trying to access to do their homework. So I know that NASA and others have approached like public broadcasting systems across the country to make sure that it's on television. Most everybody has a television and access to public broadcasting. So I think that certainly is something that would make it widely available. And the other thing is, building on Elizabeth said about showing up, So, think about the after-school centers. Kids are going to have to go somewhere eventually when parents go back to work. So whether it's the Boys and Girls Club, the YMCA, 4-H clubs, those are, opportunities to engage those kids. And then also, and I'm not sure, how this works, but places of worship, right? These are where parents and families will go and in a community. And if there's some way we can relate sort of the job opportunities or how the work of NASA benefits humanity, would be another opportunity to sort of engage communities that don't typically pursue a STEM camp.
Fabulous thoughts, Patty. Thank you. So I think we're nearing the end of our time together. Unfortunately, I would love to continue this conversation for much longer than we have. In closing, I think it would be great to hear from each of you about how, if you have any thoughts as we move into this next academic year, how will we best reach these students, and are there any particular opportunities or strategies that you'd like to offer as some closing thoughts on this? So how about we start with Dan?
Well, just real quick, Chris, I think it's an excellent question. I think from my personal perspective, particularly with this conversation, the showing up and being present, one suggestion I would make is use the local AIAA student branch, local sections with those engineers, with those professionals that do STEM work, and let's get them better connected so that they can get to the right schools, help the teachers out, help provide the content, work with the students on projects, because that's the way everyone learns, and we stand ready to help in that way, any way we possibly can.
Thanks, Dan. Norman?
Sure, Chris. I've talked a lot, and ASE is directly focused on teachers and faculty, but in addition, we increase engineering awareness and inspiration. We have a blog and a monthly Engineering Go For It, EGFI, e-newsletter for STEM teachers that has 25,000 subscribers. We also provide a compelling, richly illustrated look at what engineers do to make the world a healthier place, a safer and happier place, with tips from students on successfully navigating engineering school, other career-related information. We also feature in a magazine format suitable for elementary and middle schools in particular, authentic hands-on activities, articles about breakthroughs, such as NASA webinars and activities, contests, scholarships, and other opportunities. So in terms of reaching the students where they are, that's our big stick in the sand in that area.
Excellent. Thanks, Norman. Elizabeth?
Thanks for the opportunity to talk a little bit about this. So the National Science Teaching Association has really increased the number of webinars specifically around both virtual teaching and key topics in science and technology. So we've increased greatly the number of webinar series. Again, we're increasing our resources around activities that teachers and parents and people and anyone can use, both at home and in their classroom. I think one of the neatest things is our online event. Our event this summer, our STEM event this summer, is online and grade banded, so a teacher can come to a STEM event and hear about STEM activities they can do, and we provided a real strong virtual outlook to that. So how can you do this virtually? I think by increasing these kind of opportunities, we're meeting the need of the teachers and the science educators where they really are at to be able to provide that. But we're taking it one step further, and we know that in a time of disruption like this, opportunities await that we just have to have the courage to take. And so for the first time in a long time, all of the content associations are meeting together to talk about how do we address social justice? How do we address the issue of online teaching? How do we work together to provide support for the teachers? Because we're not competing, we're supporting each other. And so Some other STEM organizations and other content associations are all working with us to try to think about, can we do some virtual conferences? Is there a way that we could have a STEM or equity forums? And so what can we do to provide what teachers need now as we face this new uncertainty? And so I look forward to seeing what comes out of this, including our partnerships with NASA.
Super. Thanks, Elizabeth. Patty?
I just was thinking about my good fortune in the last year or so to visit 3 NASA centers, Kennedy, Johnson, and Glenn, and I thought how fascinating, first of all these facilities and the tests, but being able to meet the people that work there, I was pleasantly surprised, I guess, or impressed with the diversity of the personnel, the age. There were a lot of young people, women, people of color, and it wasn't just the brochure. You know, these were actual working scientists and engineers doing really fun, cool testing of devices and atmospheres and things like that. So any sort of virtual field trips or highlighting some of these people as role models, as spokespersons for your missions around the country, and giving kids the opportunity to really get to know them as heroes and sheroes, I think might be one way to engage them sort of long term in this journey.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Patty. So
thank you.
Thank you all for sharing these incredible insights and thoughts. I know that our community, all of you who are out there, standing with us and committed to doing this very significant and compelling work in reaching students in STEM and in STEM education. I think we'll really benefit from hearing all of your thoughts on this. And I know that I look forward personally to continuing to work with all of you and in partnership with one another toward doing some really amazing work over the next year, especially in this new landscape. So thanks for taking your time and energy for being with us today, and we'll look forward to great work together. Thanks.
All right, welcome back. We want to thank Chris and our guests for sharing their time with us today. Their viewpoints on how to successfully engage broad and diverse groups of students, leverage technology, and collaborate with other organizations are so vital as we connect with the Artemis generation. Again, if you have questions, please send them to nasaedpartners@nasa.gov. Our final session today is designed to help you better understand how to connect with NASA on Artemis. Rob, back to you to share some information with us.
Hey, thank you, Katie. As we begin to close out today's program, I wanted to take a few minutes and share opportunities for engagement around Artemis. If these opportunities are of interest to you, or if you see other opportunities, I'll discuss along the way how you can become involved, but feel free at any point to email us at the address that Katie just shared, that nasaedpartners@nasa.gov. So I am going to share today opportunities in 3 different categories for collaboration. The 3 different categories, and if you'd go to the next slide, please. So the first category tied to our K-12 work are competitive awards. NASA is a grant-giving organization. We do give grants and cooperative agreements. We also have a number of STEM engagement resources and support opportunities for teachers, students, classrooms built by us and our networks. And then lastly, we do have strategies for formal partnerships, formal strategic relationships. And so first, I'll begin talking about open competitive opportunities. So all of our opportunities within the agency are listed on the Inspires website. And so on this slide, you'll see a screenshot. You'll find all NASA funding opportunities, and you can see the link there. It provides information on open and close date and full links to competitive solicitations. The primary opportunity that's open right now is an opportunity designed specifically for museums, science centers, and informal institutions. It's a rapid response solicitation designed to really help organizations advance opportunities through virtual means, stand up virtual means or support virtual means focused on COVID-19. Next slide, please. This is the current opportunity with the current schedule, although it may flex a little bit. We are anticipating next fiscal year, so next government fiscal year, we are anticipating a broader opportunity in this category with linkages to supporting K through 12 students. So please keep an eye out for this opportunity and future opportunities in the Team 2 context next fiscal year. Next slide, please. So now I want to talk a little bit about the resources and support that we have available to teachers, students, classrooms, organizations, networks. Next slide. So 3 primary categories of opportunity. The first are opportunities that we deliver through national networks. So our engagements, our collaborations with national networks of organizations. The second are interagency collaborations in partnership with other federal agencies. And the last are resources publicly available for students and teachers. So first, let's talk a bit about national networks. So NASA has a really robust and successful museum alliance. It has over 1,000 member institutions, science centers, planetarium, libraries, out-of-school time organizations who get together regularly and discuss issues of interest to those groups, and also upcoming NASA competitive solicitations, new resources and opportunities, best practices, professional development. We have a structure for organizations providing summer camps and programs to students called NASA Astro Camp, where we support curriculum and professional development. We have an opportunity called the Mirup Aerospace Academy. It is a funded opportunity. We are anticipating a solicitation in this category next fiscal year as well, that works with universities that are designated minority-serving institutions to serve pre-college audiences, either through coordination with school districts or through camps and programming. And then lastly, through our broad space grant network, which is focused on research institutions across the country, there is a connection there through K through 12 education. As you heard earlier, the space grant community does a great job of not only engaging the university group in research capacity, but also K through 12 audiences. Next slide, please. Now I'll briefly introduce some of our collaborations with interagency partners. We have a large collaboration with the U.S. Department of Education's 21st Century Community Learning Centers. They are federal government's biggest investment in out-of-school time programming. And so we work with U.S. Department of Ed grantees to provide dynamic content, a lot of it focused on Artemis, to after-school programs and summer programs across the country through the U.S. Department of Education network. We have a long-standing collaboration with NOAA around GLOBE, which is a dynamic citizen science activity in which students across the world collect data on any number of observable factors, and we, NASA, use some of it to calibrate and ground truth our satellite data imagery. So students are strongly contributing to the body of research through authentic STEM experiences through GLOBE. And then lastly, we also coordinate with organizations like the National Park Service, their Junior Rangers program, and special event opportunities around Earth Day. So just a few examples of interagency collaboration. Happy to connect with any other federal agencies on the line about this type of work. And then next slide, please. Mike touched on this at the beginning of the program. We have a number of great examples of resources for students and educators, all freely available online. Programs like Next Generation STEM really think about how they take Artemis and commercial crew and our aeronautics research and turn it into dynamic opportunities for students. We have a very successful network called the Educator Professional Development Collaborative, in which teachers across the country, free of charge, can get professional development around STEM topics. A lot of it's delivered through webinars. They also have a really interesting approach to digital badging to help teachers demonstrate the progress that they're making. So on the next slide, you'll see what Mike pointed out, which is that all of our resources and opportunities are available through this NASA STEM at Home, and it's just this massive repository of lesson plans and really useful opportunities for teachers and students. A lot of it about Artemis, but also many, many other topics like Mars. Mike already mentioned the Artemis Challenge. And so quickly, I just want to talk about formal partnerships. So NASA does engage in formal collaborations with organizations. These are generally unfunded collaborations. For more information, we have a website dedicated to this that explains our process and approach. I'll say quickly just that in general with these partnerships, we think about how we serve organizations at scale. It's access to NASA imagery and data that's publicly available. It's thinking about how we apply our scientists and engineers and technical workforce to support development of new programs or new curriculum or video series. We collaborate with national networks, and also we have subject matter expertise in education as well. So many, many great opportunities. Please email us if you have questions about any of these things. We would love to connect on Artemis and other NASA topics. I am now going to turn it back to Mike and Katie for the final word.
Thanks, Rob. As we begin to close out the program today, please take a moment and use the QR code that you're going to see on your screen. It'll remain available at the close of today's session for about 5 minutes. This QR code will take you to a URL with a very brief volunteer feedback. Look forward to your thoughts, areas of interest in future collaboration on Artemis. At this point, I'd like to reintroduce Mike Kincaid to provide our closing remarks. Thanks, Mike.
We're going to make this really short. We are so grateful that you have spent this time with us. When I think about our partners that we have had that are with us, we really look forward to continue to work with you on Artemis and K-12, and particularly in ways that we can get NASA content to your community. And for those of you who are thinking about becoming a partner with us, again, I hope you'll reach out to us. We would love to continue that conversation with you. The website stem.nasa.gov is a great place to learn more about how you can partner with us. Because I'll go back to what I said at the very beginning, the African proverb, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And we know we want to go far, literally to the moon and to Mars, and so we got to go together. And so we're thankful that you're part of this session today, and we're thankful that you gave up your time to listen and to participate along with us. So we hope you have a great rest of your day, and again, thanks for joining.